this point.
Well,
Come on.
I keep losing time. Losing time, so it's about 5 minutes, well, 3 or 4 minutes slow.
You should tell him that.
But yeah, we know how well that.
Make sure the box is back.
Too soon? Too soon?
I'll just pull it
Where'd
down.
you go?
and fix it.
Well, we went April. We go down to Rocky.
That's what I do.
Like 3 hours south of
I think it's a clock.
drive down.
Oh, nice. Are you still here from that? No way.
No, we went to mountains this weekend. We golfed and did other stuff.
Awesome.
I know. I just I don't need a PowerPoint. I probably will.
No. We haven't heard from anybody.
Just remember Wayne's on vacation.
What else had you guys?
Yeah.
Well, I know.
We have microphones we can pass around. We'll wait till they
It doesn't? I usually have it, yeah. I usually try and keep it somewhat close.
How are you? What's in here?
Actually, I think it's supposed to say 7 o'clock.
What's the clock? Running a little late?
Yeah, we're a little late. We're almost done with this meeting.
Trying to get us through quicker?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Monday, right?
What is? Oh, Eric.
Oh, my. Feels all hard
Was
to
it
eat.
still raining when you came in? Or is it?
It was pouring. I worked in the tech center, and it was dumping over there. It was not as bad at my house. Do you? Pouring.
My grass needs it though. There's spots. I'm like,
What time are we eating
came back
tomorrow?
and I go, geez, not one of my
It says 2:30 on the,
No,
I
I
think
swear we
2:30 is what they count. It's your schedule that you, I'm pretty open during the summer, but yours is a schedule that's,
Well, let me look again. I just thought I'd ask, because I've had it.
that's what I saw on the schedule.
2:30 forever.
It's funny because I saw it on next door.
It's at 2:30 until I start school, I can't do it then.
Or something
But
weird.
Krista was saying you can't do it at 8:30, 9 in the morning.
Not typically
So our
after
grass is green. It's just these, and people thought it was the
most
sprinkler.
Tuesday mornings. I've got a standing meeting with some people. So Tuesday morning with some.
Some places are so green, the grass is like really
Yeah.
tough. Some are just
So that's the problem.
scorched by the sun too.
So, oh well.
I think I'm good.
Well, we'll take it where we can get it.
Oh heck, yeah. Well, like I said, on the mountains and we were getting
Yeah,
hammered with
totally.
Well, we'll figure it out.
That
We
works.
might have to do,
We went to the 2:30 mass. So sad. Like
and
you
then next
drive,
week I'm on
and there'd be this beautiful
vacation,
home.
so
All the trees around it were burnt,
Okay,
but the house is
you're
still
gone.
there.
I'm
And then
here.
you go half a mile.
we can
house
call
is
it,
gone.
I can call in, but
Just to see how this house might even get hit.
when is that?
I can't even imagine.
That you're gone?
Nothing.
I'm leaving Friday. Okay, so next week?
Well, but that, and they said the problem now is the mudslides.
For sure, usually after fires and first
I'm back on the 1st.
We don't have a meeting on
I know.
the 30th. So whatever we establish now, most likely it's probably not going to change too much. But if you want to meet, we can. I can get you up to date.
I figured we could do almost everything tomorrow, and then if we need to call, I can call you or something too. That's fine.
Yeah, I have it for 2:30.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing just fine.
Good evening. Thought about you on Saturday. Joel and I walked to Maddie's with our dog, forgetting that they're not a dog-friendly restaurant.
They wouldn't let you
Hot.
sit outside.
No, they wouldn't even let us sit outside. We walked back home.
Howdy.
Drove to
doing?
Good, how are you?
breakfast on Broadway.
I'm good.
Good.
We need some
Good
more
weekend?
dog-friendly.
Yeah,
No?
it was nice.
So you're off next week?
Yes.
Where you headed?
Oregon.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Where are you going?
San Jose.
Oh, nice.
Possibly San Diego as well. Still trying to figure that Thursday out.
So the
Yeah, that's
So, but it's for work.
Firehouse
Yeah.
is dog friendly, which no restaurant.
La Peeps, really? That's
Both nice
interesting.
places, but no
Yeah.
restaurant in Colorado is
I don't complain when I had that one.
Had that.
I would have lived
Peeps
there,
Pub.
but.
Yeah. I tried that for like 2 years.
You know, it's just a
Oh, really?
Yeah.
but yeah, people show up with their dogs and sit down on the patio.
Colorado's better.
Cheesy's to eat. But the quorum that you can go ahead and take information because there's no action required.
Right now, I can't.
I visited with Cheryl and she is in San Diego.
I knew she was going on vacation. Up top.
Somebody knows I like spicy.
From Jamaica.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. Well, I would have gone if I were.
Are we waiting? Do we need to wait?
Like another minute. Now you have 5.
We have quorum.
Good evening. There we go. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the City of Englewood City Council study session, July 23rd. We have actually 5 members here. Councilmember Barentine and Councilmember Wink are not present at the moment. So tonight, we have a number of things on our agenda. The first one up is a retail grow discussion, and this is for direction and information. And our Deputy City Clerk, Jackie McKinnon, is here to present to us the retail marijuana cultivation possibilities and lead our discussion. Thank you for being here.
Good evening. I'm also going to bring up, we have some owners and employees for Nature's Kiss here tonight. So if they want to come on up,
Okay.
and then we'll kind of go around and introduce themselves. Yep, perfect. So we can start if you want to just introduce yourself, let them know what you do there.
I'm Greg Myers. How you doing? I'm the grow manager.
Bruce Carter, one of the co-owners.
My name is Edmund Bartel. I'm the general manager here at Nature's Kiss in Englewood. I've been there since 2009, and I'm here to answer any questions.
I'm Rachel Lopez, one of the co-owners. So tonight we're here just to seek direction from council on if you were to allow retail marijuana cultivations in the city. I think a lot of the information was in your council communications, and we're also here to answer it. I can answer most of the questions for the licensing part of it. So I think we're just going to open it up to questions and discussion.
Great. Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. I am very supportive of moving forward with this, and I just have a question for the Nature's Kiss folks. If we allow this, how many more employees do you think you would need to hire on?
Right away. None at first because it's just a tag that's being switched. That's all that's going on.
Yeah, it would probably maybe another employee or 2, depending on the amount of production and demand. Most likely up front in the beginning, nobody. We just need to check and see, what the temperature, the flow of everything is, and then we'll move from there. But could potentially bring on an extra 1 to 2 people.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other? Councilmember Sierra.
You mentioned that you were a vertically integrated growth operation, meaning that you provide or you supply to your own retail
Medical.
marijuana operation. Would that still be the case if you move to a retail model?
Yes, absolutely.
And the quality of the medicine will still be the same. It's still medical across the board. We won't be changing any gears as far as that goes, as far as production is. concern.
And I guess I do have a second question. It doesn't really apply. My question is actually more for, maybe for the chief, if there's any concern on his end about moving to a retail medical or retail growth operation, if that expanded capacity makes any difference to the police force.
Great. Chief Collins is coming forward.
Standing. No. I think the issues that we've had in the past were more of a ventilation issues. And I think from what I can tell now, that's been corrected, and there have been no further. So
We haven't seen any violations. No.
We've added all new stuff too in our place for that.
They essentially fly under the radar with us.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have any issues crime-wise that I'm aware of. So.
And your security's set up pretty well.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah, it's like Fort Knox in there. So.
Can you repeat that? I'm not sure everybody heard that.
Oh, they have to have a certain amount of security per state, and they're right. I mean, they have everything they need, probably beyond.
We've actually helped with thumbnail drives of camera recordings to aid and assist the police department in ways that they've needed. So, yeah, we have a lot of surveillance around the building, including on top of the building, in the back, on the alley, and in the front. Multiple different angles, and then also throughout the building, there's no shadows in that place. It's all covered. So yeah, and then security, and then also as far as the smell, yeah, we've taken away the positive pressure and the airflow in the building, and then we've also added a bunch of filters, and ozone is also a trick that is used for it as well. So yeah, we've eliminated that issue. It took a lot of time and trial and error, but yeah. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Cuesta.
A couple questions, one directly related to the issue at hand. So if you're to add retail cultivation, will the number of medical plants decrease? For instance, will you have 1,000 medical plants and you'll reduce that to 250 and add 250 retail plants? Or will the total cumulative number of plants in the building go up?
Yes, we have limited space. It's not a very large growth. So yes, the number of medical plants will go down as the retail plants rise.
Understood. Thank you. And then the second question is, it's somewhat just related to the block in which you guys conduct business. How has business been on your block lately? Have you guys noticed any changes? Needless to say, 4300 Broadway has been getting a fair amount of attention. What is your take on the block and just the climate of the block?
As far as business goes, it's a good flowing area. A lot of positive feedback from neighbors and things like that. The only issue we've had is, and I'm sure that everybody in Englewood has kind of experienced this, is the influx in the homeless community. And we try, to do our best to work with, the people, homeless folks and the community outreach that's next to it. But sometimes, the people can be a little aggressive in things and kind of combative. But for the most part, most of them will kind of just, be very polite and move along. But every now and again, you'll get somebody that's maybe, drunk or something, and you got to kind of say, all right, move along. And eventually they do, But other than that, it's been really good. All of our neighbors, the barber, she cuts my hair, and I refer all my employees, and I put their cards in my store. And when Gecko Vapes was there, we worked with them and so forth. And so yeah, all of our neighbors in that area like us as far as we know. And we like them as well. JJ Lay next door, we've known them since 2009, and so yeah, I think we have a pretty good, community. When the cleaners was there, now they're, they've moved, or I'm not sure what they've done, but they're not there anymore.
And how long have you guys been in that location for?
Since 2009.
Good for you. Thank you. Appreciate the information. Thank you, Mayor.
Great. Councilmember Barentine has arrived, and she has a question.
Even the best of us are occasionally late. I think this is my second time doing that for the time, and I appreciate you guys coming.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
And so far, I haven't missed one, but some people wish I would occasionally. I appreciate that you guys took the time to give me a tour of your facility, and the difference from when y'all went in as medical and, the whole transformation and the kind of business that you've evolved into is amazing. I greatly appreciate that you have addressed the issues of any kind of odor in the community. We're working on some of the signage things because some other businesses are like, I want to be able to put more signs in. So following some of the laws, you guys have done an amazing job of that. The security, the making sure that the loitering got taken care of when there was the scooter place, and those issues all got taken care of, and I am very impressed. That's my district, and I appreciate that you're a good neighbor and that you've developed policies to be respectful to the residences that are right behind you. And you guys are locked down like Fort Knox. Of course, a lot of that's the law, but you guys do an amazing job. So to come to grips a little bit more understanding that what you're really asking for is not to do additional plants or additional grow, but just the way that they're tagged. So the plant doesn't change just who the end user is. The designation of the end user for that piece of it, and the remodel that you're doing on the property as well. I've had the opportunity to go ahead and visit, like I had spoken with you guys, with some other facilities in Denver and that, and to see you up in your game to reach that kind of level of being a business in our community is heartwarming. Whether I agree with whether somebody sells alcohol or pot or whatever, I uphold the law in the community, and I'm grateful that you guys are willing to make this as nice a business and cooperate with everybody as possible. So the real issue of what you're kind of asking us to do, if this already was stated, if you could just state it again, exactly what you think the city could do for you, and unless that's already been brought up. Okay.
I think it's pretty self-evident here in what we're sending, but go ahead and speak it because
I don't think it is, and I would really like it for the public.
May not know exactly what's in the agenda.
I would really like for the public and for us to just hear all together exactly why it is that you would be approaching the city regarding the plants that you grow and the designation, why that isn't a state issue, why we would have control over that, so that everybody can be on board for why you're here.
Yeah, each local municipality has the ability to make their own local regulations on top of the state regulations. What we're looking for you to do is assist us in amending Englewood's municipal code to allow existing medical marijuana OPCs to participate in the retail sector as well.
Thank you. Others? Questions? Great, thank you. Appreciate your coming to present to us. This is helpful. Mayor Pro Tem?
I do have a question. So if for some reason we choose not to change the municipal code, it won't impact your ability to do business, correct?
Currently, we purchase all of the retail marijuana that we distribute from other grows, licensed grows here in Colorado.
So
we want to be able to grow what we sell. That's what.
And also with the decline in medical market and the decline in getting the medical card, renewed for patients, they're just switching over to recreational. And so yeah, it would impact our business in a big way, because then we would be growing a bunch of medicine that we couldn't then sell, because it would just pile up. And on the medical side, you have to there's a 70-30 rule that we have to be in compliance with and stuff. So that it really makes it difficult and a lot of extra hoops and hurdles to jump through and over for us to, for our garden. And basically what we would be doing is just switching it over to recreational as well. so that then we can take our medical grade and then apply it to the recreational side, because a lot of the recreational medicine that is produced, is also, and not a lot of it, I should say some of it, maybe, a majority, isn't medical grade quality. And so that's one of the things we take a lot of pride in, is that we don't lower our standards for costs, savings on like cheaper nutrients or things like that, or potential contaminants and things, along with the state compliance that we have to follow as well. But, so it's just basically going to be the same quality of medicine, just switched over to recreational, and that would help us to then sell our own product that we're growing and provide a good product to our customers that we know how it's grown, where it's grown, and who it's grown by. There's a lot of quality control involved with that. So, and we like to be the ones in the driver's seat as far as producing that for our customers. And there's different trends in different parts of the state as well. And we've really latched onto a lot of the trends, and I guess maybe not trends, might not be the right word for it, but certain things that people need, certain medicines that people are asking about. And so we've switched gears and we've produced, different things. And so, yeah, we're our community and our customers are very tight-knit. We have customers that have been shopping with us since 2009 when we very started. So, yeah, that's one of the things that we pride ourselves in, is that. So basically all it would be doing is switching the color of the tag is really what it is, from yellow to blue. There's no difference. We're not going to be adding any plants or anything as far as that goes. So it's the same stuff, same amount of plants.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I also had a question to follow up with that, because I had a couple people ask me, and maybe this is more of a overview from yourselves and your industry. Some of those who really depend on medical marijuana feeling like the industry might go away and that it'll simply be taken over by recreational. What's your sense about that, and what's your commitment to those who, it seems like you're very committed to those who need and are registered for medical. What is your thoughts on that?
There's definitely a decline in medical marijuana card holders and business in the area. We've chosen to keep open the medical side and keep that rolling for everybody that needs us, but it's definitely not paying the light bill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's difference between the medical side and the recreational side. There's limitations on the edibles and then the amount of marijuana you can purchase. On the medical side, the people that are more terminal and people that have, PTSD, a lot of different, now we're getting more the 100% medical on that side, and that way we can still cater to them as well and their needs. But it's so the people that were the medical people are switching to the recreational side that's what the gear is.
But they can still get the kind of grade that they need in order to manage whatever it is they're
and
managing.
There's a lot of medical people as well that are just can't afford to go see the doctor every year and spend $90 to $150 to go see a doctor for renewals. Sometimes there's doctors that have these wild and wacky specials, but then you don't know if your card's going to come in the mail or not, So you got to go to the pricey doctors to get the good quality, and they're expensive, So.
Thank you. Councilmember Valentine.
I would encourage all the council to go ahead and do the tour. I think it opened my eyes to exactly what you guys were asking for. And I think that the other issues that you brought up about the legal differences between medical and recreational is eye-opening to that it's probably going to go away. Alcohol at one time was medicinal too. So but if it's going to be regulated and you have that drop-off, you have less privacy with the medical, you have more requirements to identify yourself and what you have purchased that just aren't there with recreational. Why would somebody do that to themselves if they wanted some confidentiality? So the law is the law, and that's not made by the city. That's higher up than us. So it is very likely, as was stated, that in the future might go away. And I will repeat, I was very stunned that all this is about is the color of the tag that's on that plant. And that affects the amount of money that you make, how you service this community, and what kind of business you can do for something that may end up going away to a different. That doesn't mean it's not available to people who need it medically, no more than when I was a baby, they put rum on our teeth when we were teething. And rum was available to my great Aunt Ro. Okay. Hey, she was always surprised how well we slept after that. But so that may be happening down the line. But in dealing with the situation that you have right now, nothing that you would be doing would be taking away anything from anybody who needs this medically. Nothing for it going away would ever stop somebody from being able to access the product either. It's just a change from the way that we introduced it in 2009 to how it's dealing with now. But I would encourage everybody on council to go ahead and take the tour, see what you've done with your business.
Everybody
and what's
is more than welcome. We've redone the floors, the walls, and everything. Everything's real nice. And like before you got here, I added that we took away the positive pressure of the airflow in the building, and now it's we put in some new air conditioning units, so that's taken away a lot of that smell issue and everything. And then
I haven't had a complaint on that in several years, and technology is helping with all of that as well. But I used to get complaints on the cleaners too, so it's an even respect for the community to not make sure that you're burdening anybody with that. But I appreciate that's come along. And as long as this community voted for this product to be legal in this community, then I will try and make sure that we do it as best as we can, as considerately as we can, and make sure that we don't hamper a business that people want.
Great, thank you. I appreciate your being here. If you'll stay put, and the others we'll talk about what we're going to do. Thank you so much for your
cards
input.
that you distributed, or?
No, I have some in the car.
Okay, if you make sure that they get
So, Council, we need to decide whether we have some consensus to have staff bring this forward at one of our meetings or not. What's your sense about this going forward? Councilmember Martinez.
I'm very much in favor of moving forward.
Okay. Councilmember Sierra.
Same. I'd like to move forward on this.
All right. We're not voting, of course. We're just getting a take on it. Others?
Certainly deserves a vote. Yes. Please move it forward.
You're ready to have it come forward. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm not ready to weigh in. So,
on whether to bring it to a vote or not?
Right.
Okay.
Which way do you think Councilmember Barentine will go?
I think that was a yes.
Does she still need?
You want to say that again?
Yes. I'll let you speak for yourself.
Am I the tiebreaker for consensus?
No, we're just getting a run on everybody and whether they want to bring it forward or not. It seems like we can. So, staff, thank you for putting this together.
Thank you.
Appreciate the work that you've done on this, and we'll see this at a future regular meeting.
Future, yeah, because we'll be reaching out to a few departments to start.
Do you know how long that might take, just so if we get asked?
I
mean, don't worry about rushing. I'm just trying to figure out how long should it take you?
8 weeks, 12 weeks. I mean, it's
8 to 12 weeks, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's great, helpful to know, because people may start asking us, and it does take time to put these things together and make sure everything's dotted and crossed and that kind of thing.
If you take the tour,
great.
Just make sure you don't have something that's anything will cling to, because I was worried a plant would touch me or something, but because it is a little confined.
All right, let's move on to the next
No, I
item.
mean, just be careful. I'm not trying to tip over any of their stuff.
All right, on to second agenda. Thank you so much. Second agenda item, audiovisual usage policy at regular meetings discussion. So City Clerk Stephanie Carlisle and IT Director Margaret Brocklander are here to present to discuss the usage of AV and the equipment used during our regular city council meetings during public comment time. Thank you for both being here. Are you going to use any AV? No.
That wasn't funny.
Well, certainly we're here to just sort of discuss or to continue a conversation in regards to AV usage at the city council meetings. So we began kind of having citizens come forward and want to utilize a computer and the projector and bringing like outside thumb drives to the council meetings prior to the meeting. Prior to that, we would have people come up and have written materials that they'd like us to hand out. We would obviously take those, pass those out, keep one for the clerk for the record, and that's kind of how we always did business. So recently it was being brought to our attention that they wanted to utilize the equipment. A lot of times we didn't have the equipment set up because it wasn't our standard protocol. So we'd kind of be scrambling. But the biggest thing is it was kind of brought to the attention of, we're plugging an outside device into our computers and exposing, we're at risk. And so certainly as a best practice, I kind of glanced around very briefly at other cities to understand what other cities were doing and recognize that was a best practice, maybe not necessarily a policy, but best practices was to kind of, it's our job as employees to avoid risk at all possible. And we had a recent malware attack that really certainly kind of took us down. So that's kind of just all why I decided to kind of move forward with that. It was never certainly to not let someone express something that wanted to be expressed. So we're kind of here to answer questions or to discuss kind of, what you would like to do or if there's some options. But again, is really a decision that I made based off of best practices and certainly conversations with our IT director and others. So.
Great. Thank you for putting this together.
Of course.
Questions? Information? Councilmember Martinez.
I don't really have a question, but in the list of options you guys provided, I prefer option number 2, which is sending materials directly to council in advance of the meeting. I'm really mostly concerned about the risk factor. Also, there was a mention in here of upload the materials to YouTube and provide a link. My only concern with that is that over time, the content on the YouTube link could be changed, and then it wouldn't be reflective of what happened at that time.
Okay.
And it also could be taken down, and then if anyone wanted to go back and look later, it would be gone. So my preference would be to go with number 2, which is to send materials directly to council in advance of the meeting, or take them that night and pass them out for income. Okay.
Councilmember Sierra.
Thank you. So the concern that the city has with any type of external drives, that type of thing, is just going to be the security of the IT infrastructure, correct?
That's one of the concerns.
Okay. Now, we do have other speakers come in and actually do show PowerPoint and video of, of their slides. What is it that they're doing differently that isn't as much of a security risk versus what could happen during scheduled public forum time?
So like, for instance, for the public hearing that we just had, the PowerPoint and all of that was vetted through the employees. So that was all kind of vetted ahead of time. And I think that's the biggest difference, is that there's not, because that's something that they'd have to bring, and it would be something we actually as staff are providing the content. And I think it's just that the content is not known.
Right.
And there's no way to know that.
Right. And what was the lead time for these speakers to provide that information?
I honestly don't know that, because it was a public hearing that was kind of in a long process. I don't know if you know that. Yeah.
Typically, when a developer is working with staff, that's provided 2 to 3 weeks ahead of time in advance of the public hearing itself. And as it was discussed by Clerk Carlisle, those are typically emailed and then worked in conjunction with the development staff to put those together.
Right. Because obviously the public, we have our council meetings every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're able to provide, or if the public is able to provide their information within that 2-week time frame, I'm just trying to understand how much time would you need in order to vet out that information for it not to be an IT security risk?
it would be staff time to be able to scan it and check it, and then certainly, I think the other thing with that is that we would also need to decide, on content too. I mean, are we going to put any boundaries on content? Or, I mean, I just feel like that's going to add a lot of staff time to try to be filtering this information, but that's certainly something that we could work on if they submitted it well in advance to make sure that it was safe.
If they submitted it a week in advance, we'd be able to check it for viruses. But that doesn't solve the content piece.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So regarding content, do we vet out the content today?
No.
Or even if there's no visual, we don't vet out what the speaker's going to speak about? Okay. Thank you.
Manager Keck, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I was just going to say that on our agendas today, when people desire to speak or sign up to speak, it basically states that they need to enunciate the topic, and that actually hasn't been done. And so, as you probably have seen over the last several months, when somebody comes forward, it just says, Stephanie Carlisle, an Inglewood resident, will address the council. But it's supposed to say address the council about something, some sort of topic. And we want to obviously honor that as well. That's in the policy that the council currently has. It says if a citizen desires to come, they need to call ahead of time and enunciate a topic. We're happy to facilitate that, but a lot of times they're not enunciating what that topic is. And I think we want to cure that too, but that's separate from the AV usage. It's just something I wanted to raise.
Councilmember Cuesta?
My questions are along a different track, but on the subject of content, are we concerned that the content might not be appropriate, or we just want to know generally what the content is? I'm not sure if I'm following that we need to vet the content.
For video?
Either way, video, picture, media, whatever the case may be.
I think we don't have a way to do that now with somebody who's speaking or somebody who's providing written content, certainly. So I think that was I've heard of other cities that have had something introduced at the meeting by video that was maybe inappropriate. So that's the only reason that content may come up, because it's kind of playing and you don't really have...
Has that been an issue up to this point?
No, we don't want to regulate content because we don't want to interrupt free speech.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
I think what we'd like to have happen is for people to enunciate, I'm resident X and I'm going to be talking for 5 minutes about medical marijuana moving to retail marijuana grow.
Sure. So back to my initial questions, which were regarding that second option. Send materials directly to council through email. This would be sent. So then if that's in our email account, couldn't they copy the city clerk and the city clerk would just open up that file and run it through the laptop as well? Aren't those attachments scanned as they get opened?
Yes, they are scanned.
So would that approach work? Because if we've got it in our inbox, assume they copy somebody from city clerk's office or IT as well.
Yeah.
Can we go that route?
You most certainly can.
Okay.
What is the impact to city clerk during the meeting? I think that was the big question.
You have to open the file and make no mistake, I get that I have plenty of technical difficulties myself, so I get, the file's not opening or, it's, for whatever reason.
So are you suggesting that they would submit it to you directly in advance as well as myself?
Sure. They email council as well as city clerk.
Okay.
And we've all got it the week out.
And then you're saying still play it at the meeting?
Sure.
But I would play it for them
Or we could
during
just-
the meeting? Or is that, I'm just
Somebody
trying to
from
understand.
IT could just open it up we've got the laptop out there. Somebody from IT could just open that same file, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Any one of us could sign into our email and open that file. And then the pitfall of that one, materials would not be shared during the public meeting, could not be referenced verbally. I'm not sure if I'm following that.
No, I said it could be referenced verbally. So the intent of this was that you would get the information.
Sure.
So it would just be coming to you in advance of the meeting. It wasn't necessarily something that we thought of showing at the meeting, but that the person then could reference
Sure.
what
Okay,
I mean, if the intent was to show you, we were just trying to brainstorm some ideas of what
I
could
appreciate
possibly
it.
work
Sure.
To make it so that it worked for everyone without impacting,
Sure.
There's pros and cons to everything.
You bet.
so.
And I appreciate the kind of battling priorities here. I do want citizens to be able to present in as many fashions as possible, and I do think media goes a long way sometimes, especially in 2018. But I absolutely get how sensitive networks are these days and how everybody's under threat. I think good points made that do we trust a developer or anybody giving a presentation more than the average citizen? And I think the developer might not even know, the citizen might not even know. I'm sure there's...
That's what I mean. This isn't about mistrusting citizens in any way, shape, or form, but, I mean, they could have a corrupted USB and not even know it. So this could be very unintentional, and this is definitely nothing against citizens. We were just trying to implement best practices and trying to understand how we protect our system first and foremost. So
very good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
All right. And I just wanted to interject here that the comment about developers, they do send it 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time.
And that was the time frame on that one? Was that a week or it's 2-3 weeks out that they typically send in? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that should be pretty clear that it's not just come on the fly and do it as well. Of course, they need it to be a well-orchestrated presentation if they want us to buy into whatever they want. So I'm sure they're glad to present that early. Councilmember Barentine.
I think the biggest issue here is the minute you start talking about content or intent of what somebody, the intent of what somebody is bringing information for. And a lot of people are objecting to this because they don't want that content or the intent of the content to be determined by the city or the city employees. Yeah. And a lot of other options have come up about ways to do this so that they could still go ahead and present and stay out of the network system of the city that wouldn't cause any problem. It is the requirement of trying to provide it ahead of time that seems to be unpalatable to people, and I don't blame them. They have a right to go ahead and address their elected officials. They have a right to say anything they want according to the Supreme Court, including swearing, because we've had cases that went to the Supreme Court where people just sat there and were vulgar and were arrested, and the city lost because they arrested them. So to their content or their intent, they have freedom of speech. They have the constitutional right to address their elected officials. And I think that this looks to be a little bit of overreach. The council before, I think you were on council when this happened, but it happened after I left the first time. They limited people. I mean, they were able to come and make PowerPoint presentations, the technology that existed at the time, and they were able to sign up ahead of time and make presentations for 10 minutes. And we limited that. Then we brought them down to, and the other people got to speak for 5. And now we're limiting them because they take up too much of our time, was the argument that was made at the time. And I am against furthering further restrictions on the citizens. I believe that there are technology options that would make it available for them to go ahead, not affect our network system, and still be able to go ahead and present, because I don't want this to be the argument.
So, Councilmember, which of the 3 do you think would be best for that then?
Littleton has just a displayer that they put on so that the audience can go ahead and see this, and they've in no way limit that, nor make any requirements for people trying to make it the presentation. So I'm concerned about that we haven't vetted some of the others, and maybe one of the 3 isn't where we need to go, because I'm wholly objecting to anything where we evaluate content in any way, shape, form, matter at all. We have no business doing that, and I think that that's going to get us into a lot of trouble. So I would like to see some additional options maybe that are unique to that room be brought up so that we can do that.
I think that's another one of our challenges, is that the way that the cameras are set up. So anybody who's live streaming or goes back and watches the video, we don't have that capability to see it anyway. So certainly during the meeting, it would be council and anybody who's in the audience who would see it. We kind of talked about, just the lack of cameras and technology.
If I might interject there, that is a problem already that is very serious in doing a public hearing, that the record that we have now that we don't have verbatim minutes does not reflect what's being shown on that screen. So the audience is already not getting that information. So I do agree with you that that needs to be addressed, because that's very important, significant information that should be documented and historically available to people as well that's not happening right now.
The
But
content
as-
is in the packet. It absolutely, the PowerPoint, anything that that developer brings forward at a public hearing is in the packet. So it is on record.
It's made public.
except for when he's taking his little PowerPoint thing and he's going, I'm talking about this area. Or we're asking him a question,
Yeah.
like when the salon came and said, here's where I'm at, here's where the wall is. Those people are not seeing that piece of it.
Right.
And those are important pieces that we do need to fix as technology is going along.
Right.
As to this piece of it, I think that we have some other options, whether there's another screen or some way that we could do this so that we could have people look at it. But for right now, that at least they have it available for the audience and council to see.
So, yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Russell is next.
Actually, I would like Director Brocklander to address what she was going to address.
Okay, thank you. I believe option 3 may address a lot of the issues. So we looked at council chambers, and we believe that we can move some stuff around, put an individual computer on the podium connected to the projector, not connected to our network. Anyone can come up, plug in, put their presentation up. What we don't guarantee is that it's going to work. It has to work for them, but we don't know what they created it in. So I can't guarantee that they copied it correctly with the sound file that goes with it. So it could present some technology issues, but it's really up to them, whoever's presenting, to have everything they need on their media when they plug in to present. This way, it's very little risk to the city. That was one of the questions. Another question that came up is us being able to put the cameras onto the screen. That is a large project in itself for us to put up new cameras and completely change out that room and the existing equipment in it. It is possible. We've done it before in other cities. Many cities do it. But we don't have that room wired for that, nor do we have the equipment to accommodate that. If that's something council is in consensus in, I would be more than happy to go get pricing on how to reconfigure and rewire that room to make that happen.
Can I ask for a point of clarification on the information? What you just said, would somebody be able to hook into the equipment if it's separate and it's not part of our network, and they had their own equipment? Would they be able to hook into it just so that it would be seen on the screen with their own equipment, with that option?
I need to look at the wiring, but technically that is possible. I just don't know what the wiring is and if it's directly connected to the podium or the projector. If it is, then the answer would be yes.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, you didn't have it, or you did have more?
I think Director Brocklander answered my questions. I do agree about not vetting the content. I think that is, I think we're going down a slippery slope. And when people come to speak, they want to be heard. I really don't think that we're going to see a glut of this happening. I mean, maybe at some time in the future that might happen, but I think at this point in time, very few people come, with that desire to do it. I do think there are some people that are technologically savvy and do that type of thing. So of the 3 that are here, I would go with number 3. I think that, but if there are other options that could work, I think we should consider those too. I'm all about what is the least expensive to the city, but also is makes this technology available to the citizens when they want to come and present.
Councilmember Questa?
I'm going to go 2 and 3. I both find manageable. 2, I do think there is that opportunity. Maybe we can use that non-networked computer. Although it'd still be on the wireless network. Would that be an issue? If somebody is using, I wouldn't think it would be.
Hopefully not. It's never a guarantee on wireless.
If that's the case, then I would say 2 or 3, and I do think 2 does present to still use a non-networked computer, assuming it's just on the Wi-Fi to display what was emailed to us.
And it's no longer going to be policy that they can't present, so that can be an option that we can certainly put out there verbally to say, present it both ways.
Sure. And again, thank you guys for looking into it. I appreciate the 2 priorities we're balancing here.
I don't like number 1 either because of the YouTube piece, and it still puts us at risk. And number 2 has a little bit of a problem for me in that a person, if we followed through with specifically this, no one else would see it but us. So how would people then access it that want to know about what was it? So we'd still have to go through that process of laundering it and vetting it and getting it out, which maybe wouldn't be a problem. I don't know. Is it a technological problem to still do that, to make it public? Because if they're referring to something we have all seen but not everybody else, it seems like that would not be the most transparent way to do it either.
Well, the people in the audience would see it, but anybody listening afterwards would not see it.
No, this is if they
Number 2.
submitted it to council ahead of time.
Oh. And then you played it?
No, well, this one says that we wouldn't be playing it, but it would be made, we'd reference it, right? Am I correct in reading it that way?
Yeah, that's, I mean, again, we're here, we are
Right.
open to all feedback. Certainly, if you have a solution that doesn't fall into 1, 2, or 3, we're here to listen to that and certainly to make it work if that's,
So the
how
thing
you'd
that
like to
I
go.
like more about number 3 is that I think all of us have been pretty clear, and you've been very clear. I know people have raised the content issue. None of us here wants
No.
to go through and do
Definitely
any
not.
content vetting.
No.
As a matter of fact, number 3 is even better because then nobody can blame us for having had it ahead of time and that we saw something that was considered violation of pornographic or whatever, that we then would not be blamed with why did you let that go through. I think that number 3 actually is the safest because of that.
Mm-hmm.
If that does happen, though, what do we do? But I don't believe it would. But what if someone put the wrong thing in or whatever? I don't know. That's the only thing that would concern me. I would want it to, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem, I would want it to be the least expense, but expense to me includes time of staff.
Agreed.
Not just the money, but do we want to have someone spend a lot of time on this? I'd like it to be the less amount of time, make it it's on the person who's presenting, it's their responsibility. If it doesn't work when they plug it in, it doesn't work. You've got, and that's part of their time that they get to do it. They just, they have to say, we could spend I do this in class. I spend 5 minutes trying to get something working, and it's frustrating. The other piece would be a 4th option, and maybe this would be actually added, but there's a machine that we own. What is it called? The Elmo. The Elmo. I thought you were going to bring it in here. But it's the one you've seen. I've seen it at other councils. Those of you that frequent Littleton, they use it all the time. But there's a machine that you flip up, and there's a stuff that it automatically projects up any written document. So we are given a lot of handouts the night of, and the person who's presenting it can actually make it go up right away, and everyone gets to see it. And that doesn't have any risk, really, to the city. There's no connecting with Wi-Fi
it's
or
not
anything.
networked. Just
Yeah.
a document camera.
Yeah, and I could see us having that up anyway to just make sure everybody else gets to see it. We can all read along with when we're read to. So I would be more in favor of 3 if we do anything, just because it feels like we are less culpable for all kinds of things, including content, which we don't want to be regulating. Councilmember Sierra and then Martinez.
So my concern with number 3 is just it's not their computer. And so this, there's a possibility that's not going to work. I've been to customers where I've been asked to use their computer. Files doesn't transfer over correctly, or it just doesn't work. So I think in that case, obviously, you just have to be prepared for that not to work. And also us providing like a time limit for it not to try to make it work. I don't want to sit there and just for minutes on end. So I think if we could just come in agreement on that. That's my concern there, is that it may not work. So.
And that is a possibility if there's a different version or...
Yeah, exactly. So we may have to, obviously we would have to provide the requirements to the public about, using PowerPoint, version so-and-so, that type of thing. So.
Remember, Sierra, if they brought their own, You might still have the
we
problem of
would still
actually
have-
having
yeah.
it connect. 'cause
Exactly, yeah, and I
sometimes
think,
those don't work either.
Yeah, Ms. Brocklander did state that she'll look into the wiring to see if that was a feasible option.
Yeah. Member Martinez?
I was going to mention the same thing Councilmember Sierra mentioned, and also another concern I have, or I guess question about number 3 is if we use a non-networked computer and speaker A comes up and maybe has an infected thumb drive but doesn't know it, and then they stick it in, and then speaker number 2 comes in and puts a thumb drive in there too, do we have any liability if speaker number 2's files get corrupted or anything like that? No.
It's at your own risk. Use it your own risk, okay?
That's good.
That's good to know. Mayor Pro Tem?
This may not work piece, and I mean, I know I'm technologically, I know enough to get myself into trouble. But in an ideal world, if we had them bring it and it was vetted for viruses, is it possible it still wouldn't work?
Yes.
Okay, so it's really going to be no different than this way than the other way.
Right. We're checking the USB for viruses. We're not checking what it is that they created. We're not checking their software. They could create it in a program that we don't have available for showing.
So could it be their responsibility to call and see what media they might need to put it in to make sure it works? Is that, I mean, we probably have all the simple things that most
We
people
have Microsoft standard products.
Uh-huh.
So if they create it in Microsoft, it's a pretty good chance. If they
Okay.
created it in something like Vizio, we would not have Vizio on there, so it would not play.
Okay.
So we'd have standard stuff. I would say 99% are going to play, but there's going to be that 1% hiccup. I've seen it before.
Right.
They create a PowerPoint with sound and motion and all these great graphics, but they didn't copy it over correctly, and it falls apart when they get there.
Okay. All right. And I guess that's the danger of doing it. You need to be prepared to go ahead even if you don't have the video. The other thing, if we went with 3, we actually could have them give us a copy of that that could be emailed to council afterward. So that would...
And put on the web as well, and
Yes.
publicly displayed. Yeah.
Yes, if it's,
If they vetted it, yeah. But
thank you.
so I don't know if you've got enough sort of mixture of things. If it sounds like you could patch something together, I think it sounds like it's number 3 if we go with anything
Right.
in general. And I feel very strongly that it's up to the citizen to figure out how they're going to do this and make it work. And I think most of them are, I'm sure all of them are very willing to do that. They just want the access to it. So, but at the same time, I liked Councilmember Sierra's idea that we make public what it is we have that they have to use. It has to be done in Microsoft Suite. If there's maybe something else, I don't know what it would be. They're ripping video off of something. There's an MP3. I don't know what it is, I don't know the technology of what all people could be bringing up, but I know the risks that they all could bring. I have been infected by things people put in my computer.
Yes.
All the time.
Okay, I will look into...
We will work together on that.
wiring council
Yes.
chambers and put a computer in.
So in the meantime, council, that means we're still at this place of not yet doing anything until they come up with what it is.
Yes.
Right? Is everybody in agreement with that, just for now? I think to get it clear, so maybe in 2 regular meetings, we might have something ready to go?
2 regular meetings, 4 weeks. Give me 6 weeks.
Okay. In the
I'm
meantime,
just going to voice
in the
my
meantime,
opposition to that because
Councilmember Barentine,
you
could
can't
you wait to
publicly
be...
state that we're all in agreement. I'm just saying I'm not in agreement with that. I just want that on the record. I'm not.
Could we make sure that the Elmo is there? And maybe begin with that as one, the Elmo, since it's such a strange, yeah. Did you name it the Elmo, or is it actually the company?
Name actually of the
Okay.
document camera system. It's the Elmo.
Okay.
So people can bring their docs, they can display it, but there's nothing like, you can't play a PowerPoint or OneNote or something like that through
Okay,
it.
great. Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you. And one of the concerns I think I heard from citizens, they weren't sure on why the change of policy. And I was much better informed after we spoke this last Monday council meeting, and it was due to security concerns. I think that alleviates a lot of people's uncertainties as to why is there this change of policy. I think even if we added a sentence or two to the agenda, I'm looking at last week's, it said AV equipment is currently not available for public use as we work through security concerns. I think that would give people a lot more patience with it as we work through it.
I can do
That's
that.
really smart. That's a great
And
idea.
thank you again for the work on that.
Of course.
I think that's true too. And since we've gone through a major break into our system, I mean, when I tell people that, like, oh yeah, we don't want ransomware again and all this other stuff. And I think we're doing due diligence and making progress on this. So thank you for your openness and willingness to explore.
Yeah, of course, certainly. We're just all highly aware of what
and you
can
should
be.
be. You were all disrupted for weeks on end. And
It always sounds like something that happens to someone else, but we...
Right. Anybody who's had their stuff corrupted. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Would you like to move on to the next one, or do you want a break?
I would like to keep rolling.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Item number 4, community-oriented policing, crime statistics review. Chief John Collins and Deputy Chief Sam Watson are here to present and discuss the community-oriented policing philosophy and the crime statistics that we currently have. Thank you. This is an informational presentation. I know you are using this, right?
Sam's got to turn it on because I don't know the first thing.
Yeah. There will be a PowerPoint.
Plugged it into itself. Yeah. I do that all the time.
You mean after?
Is this what we don't want the public to do?
This is what not 3 minutes.
This is mine.
Sorry.
There you go.
Respectful of each other. I appreciate that.
Power here, is it dirty? I don't see the little white light on the
I don't use it on. No.
Too dark. Can't see my notes though. Need a headlamp.
A light should.
Let me see if I can see it. Changes this slide. That goes forward? Yeah.
Thanks for noticing. We'll look into that.
I can do this for you.
The amazing Sam will check it out if my computer goes too dead.
He will.
There's 2 Sams.
The other Sam.
I think you're talking
I
about
did
him.
not. No, I'm sorry. You are too, but not when it comes to my computer, whether it's charging or not. So thank you.
Alrighty, I guess I'll start with just a real quick synopsis of, because we're talking about community policing. And so I'll give it to you in a real down and dirty kind of philosophical approach. That's the way it used to be. Back in the day, and I was part of that back in the day, when I started, 1978, departments were very much siloed. And they didn't need the help of the community. They would come out, they'd make arrests, they'd write tickets, they would solve your problems because they were the experts. And at the end of the day, and I can't give you the exact time when this started to evolve, but they suddenly realized, and we realized, that you may be very efficient, but you're certainly not very effective. And so that's how things started to change. And essentially what happens with community policing is that you open the doors to policing to engage the community and, as we say, create partnerships and joint problem solving. And in essence, a lot of times those solutions are longer term. And to me, I'm glad we're not back in the old days, because just writing tickets and taking names and all that stuff, you pretty much shut out a key component of what you do. And so that's how we operate within the city in a very basic explanation. What you'll hear further on down the road is our transformation back in 2014, but I'll get to that when that slide comes up. So allow me to start. Oh, one thing I did want to ask is that we'll try to get through these slides, if you will, and then hold the questions to the end. I hate to get derailed and not complete the task that we have here tonight. So what we have in the first part of our discussion is that the police department's authorized staffing level is 111. And there you see the breakdown. And you'll also note that we've included the 3 sworn fire marshal positions. And Laura Herblin, our fire marshal, is also a member of command staff. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then we also have 30 civilian positions. Okay. Here's the other tech part that I... Oh, yes. Okay. Okay. In 2017, we had 44,000 calls for service. And for your edification, what that means is dispatch calls and officer-initiated activities. And that's where we came up with the 44,000. A significant amount of disorder crimes that affect the quality of life for the community, that's mostly what we focus on. These can be disorderly conduct, open container violations, urinating in public, harassment, suspicious people, neighborhood problems, and so on. Those are the things that we and the community engage in more often than not. Policing strategies now shift based upon the trends and the community expectations. And again, you'll hear about that in a few moments. Back in October of 2014, I had been chief, I would say, from May of 2011. And what we had philosophically in the beginning, and I lived partially through it, was that officers were required to write a ticket a day and to have 5 officer-initiated acts per day. And that was the old way of determining, productivity. And over a period of time, I mean, I went through it, and I can see with the officers that we would have extremely busy days. And sometimes those officers wouldn't be able to get their ticket a day. And so the next day was just as busy, and now they're down 2. And you can see where that compiled. And what I realized was that the busier we get, and the statistics are driving us away from what we are truly here for. And so I came out to patrol in October of 2014 and told them the days of those stat-driven performance things are over. The old adage was just let us be real cops, and it's like, okay, well, let's be real cops. We're going to start identifying crime in our community. We're going to engage the community. You're going to roll down your windows, get out of your cars, and you're going to find out what's going on in the neighborhoods. We started an ad hoc, if you will, crime analysis unit, which Sam was a part of, and we had a records person, a detective, a few patrol officers, and Sam, and they tried to look at the statistics, the crime statistics, to figure out where our hot spots were. And so that was kind of the dawn of our community policing, our crime analysis. But there again, it was minor league, if you will. And so where we went from there was I appointed this gal to be a full-time crime analyst technician. And she started from the ground up. She wasn't hired as a full-blown crime analyst, but she had the talent to get there. And as Sam will talk here in a few minutes, that has helped us tremendously in regards to figuring out where the problems are in the community and engaging the community and all that stuff to figure out where we're going to take our resources and where we're going to put them. Dave, you may be familiar with this, is in New York City they had, was it CrimeStat? And it was all resource and data driven, and they would find out where their hotspots were, and they would pile the resources into that area, and in conjunction with the community, they were knocking crime out of the ballpark. We try to do that on a much smaller level because obviously we don't have the staffing for that. But what we have now is we take a collaborative approach to problem solving with the community. We engage the community members, engage patrol, code enforcement, the building department, the fire marshal, the impact team, homeless coalitions, and the DA's office. I would like to say, and I may mention again later on, but I don't want to forget what we just recently started was the CIT embedded co-responder. This hopefully someday will take us leagues from where we are right now. It's the social worker that we spoke of last year, the mental health worker, and 16 hours a week we have her, and we'll propose during the budget meetings that she come on for 2032. And she's helping us with the homeless, and she's helping us with the community and mental health issues. And I think it's a really big step for us to do that. Next one. All righty. Is this your? The community part of this for crime analysis is crime mapping. I believe there's a link on our website that the community has access to, as well as community crime alerts. And I will turn this over to Sam because he just absolutely loves the next topic that we'll be discussing.
I do actually, when we talk about community policing and deployment of police resources at problem areas, not like the chief said, not just areas that we identified the police, but with the community help us identify, areas that are important to them as well. The examples that the chief gave earlier about how we used to just, be driven by statistics, and it was important to, let's say, write a traffic ticket. But if you write a traffic ticket at some place where there hasn't been a traffic accident in 10 years, what are you really doing, right? You're writing it. But if you could write that same ticket, or if you could do your enforcement in an area that has an impact on a high accident location, or around a school zone, or around a residential area that's having a specific problem, that's much more meaningful. So that's a pretty basic response, but it's important for the community, and it's important for the police, and it matches up what the community's expectations are of the police. So I really am passionate and enjoy talking about this. So the crime analyst helped us identify hot spots and zones, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. Again, based on community expectations. Some of those include the downtown areas, schools, parks, neighborhoods. Again, the traffic examples are up there, including the high accident locations, residential areas. School zones should be up there, but they're not. But they're all important. The crime analysis allows us on the police side to narrow our focus. So we have a finite amount of resources with the police department that we need to focus at certain problem areas. The old days of, you've all seen the pin maps, the old school before computers and crime analysis. There'd be a big map of the city, and they'd put an orange pin in for one kind of crime and a yellow pin in for another crime. It's not too different than what we're doing here. We're trying to put the police officers, the police resources, city resources, where the pins are in the map. But we're much more sophisticated with crime analysis. Instead of just pins, we know the time of day and day of week and method of operation and what they're driving and who they're associated with and what they're doing in other agencies. If there's what we're finding in the area that we live in Inglewood, in that, there's stuff that comes across the border. We send things across the border, things come into us too. So crime analysis works with other city departments. One of the great benefits of having a crime analysis program is they interact with other analysts from other cities and the sheriff's offices, and they share information because some of the same problems we're having occur. A good example are the smash and grab burglaries that we're having. They come across the city limits frequently. At night, they may hit 5 or 6 locations across the whole metropolitan area. So skipped one here.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so there are two types of proactive enforcement that we focus on. Are basically hot spots and zones. The hot spots are generally small geographic areas, usually a residence or a business. It's a place that has a high number of calls for service, but keep in mind it's generally a specific location, where a zone is more of a larger geographic area. And I will give you an example of both of those here in a minute. Problem locations, again, are identified using crime analysis. The strategies that we develop for the hot spots are we drill down on the locations, the involved people, the time of day, the vehicles that they drive, the associates, their methods of operation, the nature of the criminal activity, and then we deploy specific work groups that may be affected by that towards the problem. So maybe it's not always just a police patrol problem. Maybe there's a code enforcement ingredient. If you look at a hotspot that's a small geographic area, a small house, it may not just be crime occurring there. There could be other things. There could be code violations. There could be something that the fire marshal might be involved in. Maybe it's something that the narcotics team is working on too. So we try to involve all those different work groups to come together for that one specific problem. The building department, community development is another good example, and we try to attack those or address those from as many different angles as we can. And the community policing model shows that to be much more effective than just waiting for a neighbor to call, sending a police officer over. They fix whatever that specific problem is, and then we leave and we wait for another person to call. That's the old school model that the chief was talking about. Ineffective and not very efficient.
Can I just say, and Sam will give a few examples, but truly back in the day, if you had a dope house, you would hit it with patrol and all that stuff, and then at the end of the day, something else would take precedence, so you would walk away from it. We've had a number of those, and the thing that I'm most proud of is that we threw patrol, we threw the narcs at them, and we were taking people off, we were arresting them, but we weren't solving the problem. We brought in the fire marshal, we brought in the building department, which is really kind of unique, and other chiefs in the area were like, okay, we've never tried that. And that's where their demise came from. If you can't get them with law enforcement, you'll get them with code, you'll get them with a building violation or a fire marshal violation, and you'll get them out of there. And in one particular instance, it worked, and the district attorney's office was also involved. The arrests that we made, they followed up by basically identifying these folks and not letting them get off, with a slap on the wrist, so to speak. So you do get these. When we get these groups together, it's more robust than what we used to do. But back in the day, that wasn't thought of. I mean, it just wasn't part of the process because the police could solve your problems, and that was not true. So, I'm sorry.
That's all right. And thanks, Chief. And we include the community in that as well. So the same time we're working on the problem, the hotspot problem, is we involve the community. We keep them, the neighbors, we talk to them, keep them informed, let them know what's going on. Quite frequently, we need them. We need them to show up in court and testify against an individual or a group of people if it goes to court, because it's much more powerful, and we see that in our municipal court as well as county in district court is if the people that are affected by the problem show up and testify, the judge, if they find the person guilty, is much more strict with their consequences, if you will. If he can see, he or she as the judge can see the impact that it has on the community. So we involve them as well. And we'll have some examples here in a little bit on some of these that have been successful. But again, we focus not only, when we say hotspots, that's also individuals as well. An individual can be a hotspot because we find that they move around. So it can be a group of people or an individual that we track because they're involved in whatever crime they are. So hotspots are pretty diverse. And then we evaluate our hotspots on a regular basis, at least once a month. So the group that the chief talked about, crime analysis group, still meets, goes over the hotspots, and that working group is made up of a variety of people within our police department: patrol, impact, narcotics, investigations, code enforcement. Fire marshal can come in on that, and at times we even bring other city department people in on this group, just to make sure that before we take a hotspot off the list, that it's effectively dealt with before we move away from it. And then we also look at new spots to put on the list. So the zone policing is a bit different, as it's a larger geographic area. This is the opportunity for the police department to take a couple officers. Right now we have 2. We're trying to get our third zone officer, get people hired so we can assign that third officer to the zone program. And they work in a larger geographic area. The area that we've assigned right now, we're sitting in it. Okay, the zone that we've defined, we called it our geocode 204, but it's basically Broadway to Santa Fe, Floyd to Hampton, and it includes Dartmouth Park, Cushing Park. And we've seen through our crime analysis that there's an inordinate number of calls for service in this area. Crime, calls for service, neighbor problems. A lot of them are nuisance-related problems, not necessarily felony crimes, but a lot of crimes. We've heard from the community, from the business community, from the residential community, from employees that work in this area. Many of them work in this building, but these surrounding businesses, that they were upset, they were frustrated. There were businesses that were closing and leaving the city. We know how vitally important this area is to the city of Englewood. It's extremely important, and so we've carved that out and we assigned it as a zone. So these officers cover it basically 7 days a week. There's somebody in this zone 24 hours a day, or as close to 24 hours a day as we can make it, that are responsible for the calls for service. They know the people that frequent here. They know the business owners. They know the residents. They know the management companies of the apartments over here, and they work with the Parks Department when we talk about Cushing Park. And but it's a smaller geographic area, and that's the zone. And not only do the zone officers work, but if they have to draw in other work groups such as impact or traffic officers or investigators or code enforcement, they'll do that as well. And so far we're very successful. We're running the calls for service. That program's only been up and running since the beginning of the year, and we're running the numbers. And one thing you have to be cautious of is when you in community policing, when you are in these types of areas, sometimes the calls for service increase because you want people to call the police. Historically, people would be frustrated and they'd quit calling the police. So the calls for service would drop, but yet the problems are still there. So in community policing, we encourage them to call. We want them to call. We put police officers in there, and they initiate on their own different activities, which create that number of calls. So we have to make sure when we look at just purely calls for service and crime rate that we put it in perspective of the fact that we've put more resources in there. So that's gonna increase. In a perfect world, it'll increase and then decrease. So we're tracking that right now. Any questions about? Oh, I'm sorry. I got one more slide on the zones.
He wants to continue.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. I limited.
Didn't-
Sorry
didn't
about
mean
that.
to.
Okay. That's my mistake. I was getting ready to move away from the slide.
Okay,
Old habit.
that's
Sorry.
fine.
I apologize for that. This one more slide on the zones. They're again they're responsible for their area of responsibility, working with the community, developing strategies to reduce and eliminate problems in the assigned areas, and the focus isn't always, like the chief said, to arrest people and send them to jail. Our focus is to reduce or eliminate the problem. If we can't eliminate, we try to reduce it enough to where it's a lesser problem. So it's not always, to get there, it's not always about putting people in jail.
Before Sam gets off on that, at some point you're going to mention those examples.
Yeah.
But there was one for crime analysis that I think finally got us into the. It made me feel good, because if you recall, remember the homicide of that chef from Denver in the 3000 block of Acoma. They struggled. The detectives struggled. They sat in their. I walked into a meeting one day, and it's like, we got nothing. And because it was an out of the blue, it's kind of a stranger thing. And through crime analysis, our gal came up with a. They went door to door, as we always do on homicides and major cases, and somebody had a video camera on their house, and we were able to get a picture of the vehicle during the time that this took place, and no license plate or anything. And so the crime analyst hooked up with all of her different contacts that she's developed over time, and lo and behold, there was a shooting, or a drive-by shooting in Westminster in a white Jeep. And well, maybe not. We'll see. Well, it turns out it was our two bandits, and that's the break that they needed, and that thing rolled from there. And within the last month. The final defendant was convicted, and both have very lengthy prison sentences. So we're in our infancy stage with crime analysis, and a lot of the things that we're doing. If we make mistakes, that's fine, as long as it's a mistake of the heart. But this is the direction that we have to go, because we can only get better at what we do, and by doing all these different things with the zone policing and the hot spots and the crime analysis, that takes us away from the old way of doing things. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry.
And actually I'm going to turn it over back to you, Chief, on the indicators of effectiveness. The judging and the measurement of efforts sometimes are difficult, but anyway, we do have some indicators of effectiveness.
Oh, now it's up to me. One of the challenges of community policing is, how do we show that what we're doing is effective? And in a sense, when we got our citizen survey results, this kind of tells us that we're heading in the right direction. The one that I was proud of was 79% an excellent or good rating on police services. I thought we finally had the firemen beat, but not to be. But in all the years that I've been here, that was a fairly high rating. And then to see the follow-up ones where the positive ratings that the community said is a place to live, and safety in the neighborhood, safety in the downtown areas, to me that tells me that we're on the right track. And but there's still plenty of work to do. So. And then we've noted on top here a decline in calls for service since organizational policing philosophy was changed in 2014. There's been a slow decline, and more so, I'm glad to see that rather than a sharp uptick, because then it would be, John, what are you doing? But in a sense here, we've on the next bullet, it says resource allocation was evaluated and police personnel shifted a focus from stats to problem-oriented policing. I've already said that. And you'll see that a lot of this is redundant, but this is how we've changed. The officers use free they're utilizing free available time in those areas that experience higher calls for service and higher incidents of crime and disorder, rather than in search of an officer-initiated act or a ticket that really has no impact on driving behavior. And then an increase in staffing levels, changes in resource allocation, and changes in organizational goals and objectives have resulted in the deployment of more officers into those areas that experience high calls for service and higher incidents of crime and disorder. All of the increase in staffing that we've received over the last few years from council, those folks we've been putting into what we said we were going to put them into, the zone policing officers. Sadly, we have 2. We were going to get 3. One of the guys was tussling with a bad guy not too long ago, and tore his shoulder tendons, and out he is for 4 months or so. So it is what it is. But I do want to throw in here because I'll forget. We're on the cusp. We've had problems with staffing again. And what I mean by that is we're 5 down, and we have 3 on the injured reserve list. So we've been operating with, basically, we've been down 8 guys, 8 men and women. I am on the cusp of hiring 5 right now, and 3 have already accepted, 2 want to come here like nobody's business, and 3 are on the injured list, and they'll matriculate back into the group as soon as they can. So the sun is starting to rise again on our staffing levels. So I just wanted to throw that out there for you. Hit that button. Again, indicators of effectiveness. Part 2 crimes consist of misdemeanor crimes, public disorder crimes, and nuisance violations. The police department has seen a reduction in Part 2 crimes. Officers focus their free time in areas, again, that experience high calls for service. Zone officers assigned to small geographic areas, hotspots, collaborative approach to problem solving. Again, this is all, everything that we do, you're going to see part and parcel of whether it's a hotspot, whether it's a zone, whether it's a collaborative approach with the community and or another entity within the city. Next. Part 1, crime. Crime consists of major crime offenses that are reported, and they are murder, negligent homicide, rape, robbery, assault, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson. The 27 data will not be available until mid-year of 2018. Reported Part 1 crimes have remained relatively consistent in the city of Englewood since 2012. Part 1 crimes, quite frankly, are difficult to solve, as you know, I take that back, are difficult to offset from the get-go. It's difficult to prevent homicides. Although I would offer that with our mental health approach over the course of the next few years, you won't be able to gauge that, so to speak, but we'll be getting folks the mental health that they need. So, you know, and the crime, you know, the crime of homicide and assault, you know, whether it's within the family or in the community, you know, if we address the component of mental health issues, we can't say how many we offset, but you know that it has to have a positive impact on the community. But how do we currently address Part 1 crimes? Through enforcement, investigations, education, engineering, and hotspots. The chronic problem locations that have Part 1 crimes has been addressed utilizing the hotspot policing philosophy and has been successful in small geographical areas. And I would mention there whether it's breaking, you know, the felony thefts, the breaking of cars or burglaries. If we see a spike in where it's taking place, we will let the street cops know where the problem is and out they go to address those. So I think there's
do these examples.
Oh, did you? Yes.
Yeah, and I had to turn on the light so I could read. Sorry. Didn't make the font big enough. We have many examples of success in the hotspots. We wrote down 3 of them, in that they carried over into the Part 1 crime. So I can just briefly describe some successes that we in the community have had. The first area, I can't name specific addresses, but I can kind of give you a location. In the area of Tufts in Delaware, an Inglewood police officer was aware of a nuisance location associated with criminal activity. Started off as street-level drug dealing, flop house, if you will, with a number of people involved in the criminal activity. This was one where the neighbors were extremely frustrated. They were calling over and over and over again. It actually got to the point where we started looking at it, and the problems occurred, but they were so frustrated they quit calling. We thought things were okay until all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, they started calling again. It's like, no, the problems are still going on. So this was a major impact on the community. Through the use of crime analysis, the type of criminal activity and information from neighbors was evaluated, and the location was identified as a hotspot. The impact team opened an investigation and worked in collaboration with patrol officers, the Arapahoe County Narcotics Team, Code Enforcement, Fire Marshal, and Building Department, and the DA's office, like the chief mentioned. We bring them into the problem-solving efforts, as well as the Inglewood Municipal Court and the prosecutor. Doesn't do a lot of help if you write them tickets, yet the prosecutor and the judge doesn't know that it's a specific hotspot problem area. The patrol, narcotics team, and impact made a number of contacts, arrests, and observations. Residents of the area played a critical role making these observations and helping the police officers in the police department with the investigations. And then eventually Impact obtained a search warrant for the residents, and upon execution of the warrant found 16 people living inside the house, 2 of which had active warrants. The residence was condemned based on life safety concerns. That's when we pull in the fire marshal, building department, code enforcement, and ultimately foreclosed on. This individual case cleared many burglaries, auto thefts, and drug cases because the people were involved in a variety of different crimes. So those were the Part 1 crimes there. Another situation in the area of Galapago and Oxford. Crime analysis was utilized and identified a significant number of calls for service at this location, to include SWAT calls, assaults, stolen vehicles, drugs, disturbances, and wanted person. That it was designated as a hotspot. This is another example where the community was very actively involved in this. The patrol officers focused their free or available time on enforcement efforts in the area. Additional resources, including the Fire Marshal, Code Enforcement, Building Department, Narcotics Team, the East Metro Auto Theft Task Force helped us with this one. Worked collaboratively to effectively stop the criminal activity at this location, which occurred over well over a 6-month period, actually close to a year-long period. Resulted in several arrests, property being condemned. The owners of the property actually, in this case, made all the repairs necessary and then sold the property. And again, this cleared many stolen vehicle and burglary cases, Part 1 crimes. Another area near the area of Shenango and Logan, Inglewood police received several calls from neighbors of a residence where they believed illegal drugs were being distributed. Additionally, these individuals were involved in other criminal activities to include burglary, theft, motor vehicle theft. It was identified as a hotspot. Pretty much the same working group that I described earlier looked at the problem. Ultimately, multiple arrests were made from the residents, and currently it's being in the process of being remodeled, and the people that are responsible for the criminal activity are gone. They've relocated, bringing relief to the neighborhood. Those are 3. We have others, 15 or 20 others that we could talk about, but I wanted to bring those in as examples because they also included the Part 1 crimes like the chief was just talking about.
Okay. Crime per capita. Englewood ranks in the middle of compared municipalities for Part 1 crime rate per capita. the following chart takes into account total population and total Part 1 crimes. It's important for you to realize that the smaller the population, the more impact a single crime will have on the overall crime rate. And so, and I hope some of this will, what you'll see, like Glendale, if you look at the numbers there, it's a much smaller community, and you can see where the impact of their Part 1 crimes has on their rate. And I asked Kelly Martin, the commander of patrol, to I think it was some folks wanted to see it statewide, so you'll see Grand Junction in there and Pueblo and whatnot. But you'll also notice that Sheridan actually is, I think they're a little bit smaller than Englewood, and so their crime rate is a little bit higher. There was an employee within the police department who was touting that the Englewood Police Department is #1 in the crime rate in the state. I think we had that distinction a long time ago. But if you compare us to like cities, I think it's important to see that we're still up there with our number 60, and another like city being Wheat Ridge being 58. I consider Sheridan to be somewhat of a like city. It's a border. It's on our border. And then you can see the numbers as they move on down the line with the other cities involved. The really large cities will have a smaller crime rate, basically because of their population. They have a lot more crime, but their population is much bigger. What I would offer, and because the slides are just about done, but I don't want to forget, there's a lot of discussion this evening about crime, this data and crime analysis and whatnot. And I am still a novice. I am not a crime analyst, but I found the gal that could do that for me. So in a subsequent study session, I would be more than glad to bring in our crime analyst and Kelly Martin, the patrol commander, to go further, to take a deeper dive, if you will, into how crime analysis works and really the full gamut of what she does, which is pretty impressive. And if I just want to throw it out there because you may ask me some questions that I may or may not be able to answer tonight, but I'll come back with the folks that can answer those questions. So I just wanted to put that out there. And finally, our strategies for 2019. Again, the top one is, as always, become fully staffed, filling all vacant positions. Staffing, I do want to address the staffing levels in the fire marshal's office and dispatched, and that will be determined. Continued focus at problem locations defined by crime analysis and the community. Resource deployment to hotspots and zones. And basically what I'm saying here, without having to read to you folks, is to continue on and refine what we're doing and get better at what we're doing. Because this truly, unless somebody disagrees, this is the only way to go for policing in this day and age. So with that, I would offer up time here now for some questions.
Councilmember Sierra, kick us
Well,
off.
you beat me to the punch, Chief. I was going to ask you about the discrepancy I see between your attachment, which lists about 23 or 24 different crimes. The big discrepancy I saw between that one attachment and the crime mapping tool was in theft.
Yeah.
And so when you look at theft on the crime mapping, you see, I believe there's about 25 or 30 different items per page, and there was about 9 pages worth.
Yeah, and I agree. We took a look at them, and we have a professional guess, if you will. What we're saying, it was a Part 1 crime, shoplifting, and that person also possessed drugs, let's say. So that's kind of a misdemeanor attached to a felony, but that's an educated guess. And I don't want to steer you astray because I could be completely wrong. And that's why I would offer to bring in the folks that put these together And I'm sure there's a logical explanation, but I am not going to stand here and tell you and give you an answer that I'm not
just some more
sure.
information on that discrepancy. What is classified. Obviously, some of the concerns I'm hearing from my district are just break-ins into garages and things being taken. So, where does that fall into? What type of theft is that? That I would think would fall under a Part 1 crime because the dollar threshold should. What's the threshold between?
If somebody breaks into your garage, it's a burglary.
Okay.
And then if something's taken from there, let's just say it's a shovel. That's a petty theft or a misdemeanor theft, but it's attached to the burglary.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
I'll have to just double check. I believe the way that it's coded within the crime mapping tool, garages are under theft.
Yeah.
But I'll have to just double check and just further analysis on that. Another question I had was in regards to the hotspots and the zones. And did you mention earlier that the zones were something that we started at the beginning of this year, 2018? Yes. So I guess that zones doesn't really apply here, but have we seen a change in the number of hotspots that we've identified over the past 2, 3, maybe 5 years?
Change?
A change, for the worse or for the better.
Yeah, I could. So we assign hotspots on an as-need basis. I mean, the police department still responds to all calls for service. Obviously, we take great pride if people call, we show up. And so a lot of agents or a lot of locations that may not necessarily be a hotspot still get police attention. They still get police officers respond. They get follow-up. They get investigations. There's tickets that are written. Code enforcement, building department, firemen. They're still involved. For it to be a hotspot, it has to be an inordinate amount of calls for service. It has to be a high calls for service, high crime area, something that is out of the ordinary, if you will. If the crime is not an ordinary occurrence, but something a higher crime rate, a higher call for service. So that number fluctuates. What we try to do is have a amount of hotspots that are manageable. Again, our resources that we can deploy are finite. So if we had 30 hotspots, we wouldn't have enough resources. So we try to keep it at a manageable number, somewhere between not more than 6 or 7, if you will. And that's why that crime analysis group meets regularly to make sure that before we remove something off the list that it's effectively dealt with. And then we look to see if there's any information out there on another hotspot that we need to bring in. Sometimes we've been down to as low as 2 or 3 hotspots. Right. Some hotspots, as bad as it sounds, may not go away. High accident locations is an example because the volume of traffic is increasing. We're still effective at reducing accidents. Our statistics show that. But just by the mere fact that more people are driving, there's always going to be locations that have high accidents. And so that's one that will always
to
be
piggyback onto that. Back in the day, we would do roll call information, and some cops would take the time to write down there's a problem by the mayor's house, and then they would breaking into cars, and but they were sporadic, and once that went out there, after a week, the sergeant signed off on it, going, well, this one goes into the file cabinet now, and so that's no longer, part of the puzzle. What we do now is we utilize OneNote. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. There's a better program coming. I think I found it, but all of the hotspots are up there, and the thing that impressed me was one of the guys came up to me one day and says, they used to be manageable. He goes, but now I can't get to them because now you're telling me where all the problem areas are, and because we're getting so much information now that depending on what the nature of the hotspot is, they have any number of places to where they can devote their attention, especially in their assigned districts. Back in the day, and being part of that information was not out there, at least not in that sense. They're getting more information now than they ever had, and that's the purpose of crime analysis. And then it's up to us to try to figure out how to deploy, the folks to, those different locations. So,
2 final questions, and So do we happen to know what the number of hotspots we have at this moment?
Up on OneNote, I'm sure we do.
I'm guessing it's somewhere around 5 or 6.
Okay, and then last question is I know it's kind of hard to state with the different variables involved, but is there any evidence to show that, having police focus on a specific hotspot, if that's dispersing activity to surrounding neighborhoods?
I think that's for community policing. I think what you'll hear from anybody that will tell you the truth is that you attack the problem in hopes of arresting somebody. If you attack the problem, there's a good chance you're going to move them. And I've always said shamelessly that, if I do move them, I hope I move them out of the city and into somebody else's backyard. That's just me. But that's a fallout. I mean, if it's like throwing a grenade into one of these houses, they're going to disperse, but where are they going to land? And they're going to land in Littleton, Aurora. They're going to move 2 blocks over, and then the process starts all over again. But with the crime analysis, we all share the information. So there are cases where we get people, and we've already got a pretty good indication of what we're about to get into because that information is already pouring in from Denver or Aurora or wherever. So
The collaborative approach, some of it involves the property owner, if it's a rental house. So they're aware of the activities, and they make their own independent decision to evict. But what we do, like the chief alluded to through crime, if we move somebody to another agency, our crime analyst will contact that crime analyst and say, sorry, but here's who's moving into your city. Here's what's going, here's some of the issues that they've caused. And vice versa, moving into the city. So, we look at a variety of reasons. But sometimes, they are displaced. But that's not our goal to displace them, but it's a result of enforcement action. So.
Thank you.
Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. Thank you for the information this evening. So a hotspot can be an actual individual address or an area. Is that correct, or is it always just kind of one address?
It's generally, the majority of them, a typical hotspot is one location. Maybe it's a house. Maybe it's a business. But it's a small area. Again, it can be an individual that's moving around that's creating problems. It could be a motel room. It could be one specific area that has a high number of calls for service or crime in one small area.
Okay, so it's not like this whole area. It's more like this one house or this one
Correct.
block.
Yeah. The
Okay.
area is the zone.
or
Sure.
business type. What we're running into now, and it's very prolific, these gangs that come from other jurisdictions, they will hit, like Sam said earlier, they will hit 6, 7, 8, 10 different phone stores or liquor stores in one night or 2 nights. And so a hotspot may become a liquor establishment, and these guys are hitting at 4 in the morning, and where the guys are going to be at, and hopefully that they latch onto them if we do get hit. But it could even get to that point. I mean, that's where the crime analysis really helps us with all these different trends, the bad guys coming into Englewood, and if they get caught somewhere else, we're right there ready to file cases on them. So it's a good network, and I'm so glad that we got involved more so in crime analysis because we were behind the curve back in the day. So.
We have done larger areas, not to mislead you, like a park.
Sure.
The park can be a hotspot. A good example is Duncan Park was one recently. There was problems with people breaking into the bathrooms after they've been closed, going inside, using drugs, creating problems, harassing neighbors as they come out and walk their dogs, making it uncomfortable for kids playing in the area. So this whole park was a hotspot. And that's another example we could give that we've been very successful. That's one where it went away and then came back. So one part of our crime analysis is to review old hotspots to make sure that the problem doesn't reoccur, and that if it does, that we're early in trying to fix it.
That leads me to another question as it relates to the hotspots, as it relates to particularly drug or narcotic violations. Have you seen trends in our city relating to those particular violations? Like in certain areas, or maybe like around the motels, or?
Well, the motels and homes, and that's how, a lot of times that's how it starts. Frequent traffic at 1 or 3 in the morning, and from there, that part of it's obvious, and then all of a sudden you're into the auto thefts, and bad guys have all these different expertises, if you will, and so they usually blossom. Whether it's, and it's usually one location, like in a hotel, there could be several rooms involved. But for the drug activity, it generally starts off with these homes, the problem homes, as suspicious drug activity, and boom, it takes off from there. And I would say most of the ones you just spoke about were originally reported as suspicious or suspected drug homes.
Okay. And then I have 2 other questions. How are our overdoses reflected, or what are they marked as in our community crime mapping tool?
I don't think they are.
They're not.
Because
I didn't
it's not
see them listed on
yeah,
there.
I mean, technically or theoretically, it is a crime use of a controlled substance, but that stat would, I think we would be able to come up with an overdose number, but clearly the coroner should be able to give us some information as well.
Okay, my last question is, on all of the events listed on this crime mapping tool, do we report all of those on each of those? I didn't see, like for one example, death investigation, something that we report, but other cities do. So I was just curious about kind of how that works for each of those event types.
I think it's, with the program that we use, I don't, and I'm going to guess maybe community interest, because they want to know where the crimes are taking place, not necessarily and when you say death cases, of course, let's say our homicide would be.
Sure, I see homicide
noted.
in there and attempted
But,
homicide.
folks that pass away, we don't track those, if that's what you mean.
Okay.
That's based on a program through LexisNexis. So they define the categories, and then we have to try to fit
Into
sometimes the crimes that occur in Inglewood into those specific categories. So some of the wording they use is very generic,
Right.
and so it's like invasion, privacy. What does that mean? So we try to when we input the data, try to make it as consistent as we can, so
Thank
it's
you.
accurate to the public.
Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
On the very first slide where it says the Inglewood Police Department's authorized staffing level is 111, how long has that number been in place?
You mean total?
Yeah, the total. More so even the 78 sworn police officer positions.
78 is this year, and I think Kathy's here. I think Kathleen Wrinkle had a report on our authorized numbers, and I think last year was 79, but these are our current numbers. That's accurate.
Okay, so the current numbers, and then my question was, you said that we're currently down 8?
Yes, what we have is 5 vacancies, and I want to say there were a couple of retirees, 2 went back to the civilian life for officers they couldn't turn down, and so that was 5, and then we have 3 on the injured list, so to speak, and again, we've already made 3 conditional job offers to 3 folks, and 2 very qualified candidates coming in to finish up their testing, so we should be back to at least the 5 will help us.
So currently we're at 70 instead of 78.
We're
73. You're down 5.
Yeah, 73.
73. Okay.
But we're authorized 78, so it's just that I will tell you that hiring for law enforcement has become, and I mentioned it last year, and it's gotten, so perplexing and challenging, if you will, not only with police officers, but I believe on our last testing, we had five to six people that wanted to be police officers. And in some cases, you would have, back in the day, it would be over 100. And, as long as the job market is really good, folks are chasing those jobs rather than police. But we also make sure that we don't settle for second best. And I'll pass on a few candidates because the fit has to be right, and I don't want to have question marks, and I certainly don't want to see my picture on TV. And the same thing with dispatch. I mentioned the other night, Aurora Dispatch has 80 authorized positions, and they are down 40. And that is brutal for those poor folks that have to work that. The sheriff's office is down 20 deputies. Arvada is down 20 cops. So I don't want to say I consider myself fortunate because it's painful, but it's just something that everybody in the community is going through right now. And I want to say it's a cycle, and that too will pass. But I kind of got away on that a little bit, so I apologize.
Okay, that's okay. And then you mentioned that there was somebody in the police department that was talking about us being the highest per capita crime rate.
Yeah.
Has that been stopped?
Yes, it has. As soon as I was appraised of it, I said, God bless that person. But that's old news, and that will not happen again.
Okay, because here's the problem that I have seen. People go through the Citizens Academy and they come out saying that we have this problem, and for one group of people, one of the committees, a lot of the people on that committee have been through that, and they're going to come to council and tell us we need more police officers.
Yeah. And I agree with you, because you trust your people to go in and say the right thing, and as they're giving their they may be in a position, let's say, in the Detective Bureau, to where right now, they're struggling with just a number of very critical events and high profile, and one or two of them are our instructors. And so when they go in there, I would not be surprised at where they kind of let loose some steam by saying, we really need your help, because the audience is there in front of them. And so before our next academy takes place, we have discussions with them about, from here on out, as to what the protocol will be as to, we all struggle, but at the end of the day, please don't offer your personal opinion, because then I have to answer to it, and council has to figure out if I need more people or not. And so that's an information flow thing that I really do need to address.
Okay.
So
I appreciate that. And then I have one other question, because this has troubled me somewhat. And I mean, some of what you were explaining tonight makes sense to me about the community policing. And so, let's see ahead. What does it mean to engage community members?
The easiest way to say it for me is to do what we never did before. And, back in the day, we weren't getting out of the cars and talking to this gentleman as to what truly is going on in your neighborhood, and tell me what it is, and tell me how we can fix this. That's my idea of community engagement. There was an address in the 4500 block of South Delaware where that community became so engaged to where they were angry at the folks that lived in this house. It was drugs, it was stolen cars, it was you name it. And they participated with us into a heck of a solution. And they celebrated that success to the point where I think they had a block party. And but to me, that was a terrific example of us telling the neighbors, listen, we can't do this all on our own. If the guys get busy, they can't sit on that house. But if you happen to spot somebody out there, don't go out and confront them, but let us know. Some folks take license plates. And that's where the engagement comes from. The example I gave you was I think, a fabulous one, because that's the biggest win for an entire neighborhood that I've seen. And there are similar ones, but these folks relished in it because they had a part in the solution. And that's what I want to see. I don't want to try to solve this problem all on my own, because I'm not naive to think that there are better ideas out there. And so without the community, we're back to where we used to be, and that's unacceptable,
Right.
for us now.
And I appreciate that, and I'm okay with that. I guess what I wanted to make sure was that community policing is not just telling on your neighbor. Because, because I think there have been some situations in the community that perhaps maybe a well-intentioned police officer has said something to a person, and then it actually fuels a battle between neighbors rather than resolving it. And so what you've been explaining tonight helps me understand that that's not what it is.
No, and what that is the things that cause me gray hair. It's, whether it was intentional or unintentional, sometimes comments we make to the community can be very powerful, and sometimes they're unintended, the consequences. And so, I agree with you. I mean, there are some that they have a good heart and they say the wrong things, and boy, it spirals out of control. And but you own it. I mean, we have to own that, and I really hope that those instances are few and far between.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Chief, could I, just to piggyback on the question about the academy and the misinformation, you said going forward that'll change. Why can't we send something to the past two cohorts and give them the data that you've given us here, and suggesting to them that perhaps they've been misinformed about the crime rate in England?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a good idea.
I think that would be helpful with I don't know. I have not heard this directly, but I've heard at least a couple council members say that.
And I've heard it, yeah.
Yeah, so is there a way to send that? I mean, we know who those people were that went through it.
We have a cadre of graduates, and they're a close bunch, is my understanding.
Yeah, I think they're great
And I
volunteers.
think that's a great idea, and that will take place.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councilmember Queston.
Thank you. Thank you guys for the presentation. I appreciate it. I know it's a thankless job, so I appreciate all that you guys do and your staff as well. Going back to the total number of staff members, 111, I believe it comes in at 111. And there's 3 zoning officers total? Or are there more than 3?
They're factored into the patrol numbers.
But they make up 3 of those 111 positions?
Yeah.
And so the zone, I've got that at 2.7% of staff. So that 2.7% of staff is getting 5% of the total calls for service, which is significant, and I know that that's another area where those guys get spread thin. 75% of their activities involve disorder and nuisance issues. What is the remaining 25% comprised of?
I'm sure, and this will be a professional guess on my part.
Sure.
What we're talking about is a lot of the problems that they deal with are Part 2 crimes. And whether it's with the homeless community, the folks that are doing things that are inappropriate or whatever, those are considered the Part 2. You'll have your shoplifting and whatnot. If the zone officer goes to Walmart and suddenly it becomes, let's say, a shoplifting arrest that turns into a felony theft, that turns into a possession of drugs, then that becomes part of that 25%. There could be any number, and what I'll do is, and that's part of the Kelly Martin and Shauna Tabling presentation that I would really offer up, because that 25% would probably result in cases that are felonies that go to the Detective Bureau, and and then traffic and whatnot. But because they're jack of all trades, we do not take their ticket books away, and so they're entitled to write, traffic tickets. We haven't mentioned, but we also have certain days where a large group of officers come together. And initially, they were focused on this area here, and they would essentially saturate the area, and they would come up with any number of misdemeanor arrests. They would come up with felony arrests. The zone policing officers would be involved. The impact team would be involved. The traffic team would be involved. And we try to bring in officers from different shifts to give them exposure to these type of events. And so to answer your question, I tend to go off in different directions, but that 25% could be quite a few things. And I know I'm right, but to drill down even further, I would just love to have those two other people here so they could let you know specifically what they are.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor.
This has been a great presentation. Appreciate all the work that you put into it. If we could get some of the data from some of those without having to do another presentation, is that possible? Just to get some of the drilled down a bit?
I think there's a lot that we can present to you. Sam and I talked about the heat maps. I just saw one. I think it was on the one on the City Link, and that's still telling. But you can see if you follow Broadway, which is a major arterial, you can see that it's a different color than the others, and so there's still work to be done. And by no means, I mean, this is still in its infancy stage, and 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but we are definitely heading in the right direction. And feel free to ask. I think it's important, Eric, that we schedule crime analysis and Commander Martin here to really give you the flavor of what she does, and what we hope that she can do in the future. So.
Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Do you all want to take a quick break now and be back in 5 minutes? We're going to have financials, and then I think we'll be ready to close up with everyone. Great, thanks. 5 minutes. It's really nice and warm here. Yes.
We were told that was supposed to be
Exactly. You can leave that on.
quieter and not hot, but it is.
I've been too busy to shop at campers. But I'm not going in a tent.
That's what my family
They can go without you, right?
Right. I swore that off 2 years ago. I can't let them wear me down.
Oh, yeah. It's too much work.
Yeah.
And it's one of them is a legend. That it's fascinating, because it's like this guy was picked up for whatever drunkenness, and he had to pay a fine of $1, and that kind of stuff. And it's an old book, and it's really aged, but it's kind of a neat part of history.
I tracked down Tim and told him on the scoop.
Yeah.
He just
It's not loaded. That's good. I have bullets.
That's on bullet.
Opportunities to be close to the community room. We have right on the lobby, there's a community room.
Anyway. Okay.
Sir, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll remember you. We'll get you.
Yeah.
Or staff to tell me to stop.
Okay.
But,
Yes, I will. So.
no, and feel free.
Yeah.
Anything. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, the numbers, and they just don't add.
No,
they're not one-on-one, I guess.
Well, when you told us, because the thought process, because you could tell it was an addition at the very end.
Right.
And we were in panic mode. It's like, okay, let's get this stuff, and people scramble and give it to us and send it out. And, you look at it. Right.
I know, and it doesn't help with the...
Right.
No, we're okay.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Good.
Ready to go through the slides?
Yeah.
Okay. Look good.
Yeah, it does. So far, so good.
Right.
You've been through before. You're going to be bored now.
Oh, never.
Never? Okay.
Never. Well, actually, if we turn off those lights, I may doze off.
Might doze off. Oh, okay.
Just a bit, so.
I gave you a preview the other day.
You did. And I looked them over again, and yeah, just looks good. Looks good.
Yeah, we're still strong.
Maybe that.
Oh, good.
Maybe I'll just
Make it easy for me?
Yeah. Yeah. At least my portion of it.
Okay.
So it's coming, there's training on these weekends, especially now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, John, let's continue.
Let's.
Feels really nice. It really does.
You know, Rita.
Can you feel it?
Oh, yeah. Rita and I used to, with the old one, just cook, and our faces would be covered in sweat.
Yeah.
So with the new one, I can feel it from here, but it's not cooking us as badly as the old one.
It's not as hot as the other one. Yeah. But I do like it, and I kind of
sweat.
Oh, yeah. Jacket on. That's all I should do.
Side too. Right.
Okay. What?
I said humidity side too, but.
The humidity's high? Yeah, I know. So I think the more humid it gets, the more cold I get.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, it was like 72 or something earlier.
It's 100% right now.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's true. You need that.
No, I don't.
Oh, no, we'll leave it on. It's my heater.
You want a little extra light, I
Your
suppose.
heater. That's not fair.
Yeah, it is nice.
Yeah, how was your walk there, Sam?
Did you go out?
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah,
raining?
you did.
A little damper on the edges.
No, I just went and got some.
We forgot to put our orders in.
Oh. All right, continuing on to item 5, which is the June 2018 financial report. And here to present for is Director Kathleen Winkle. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're still looking strong. Our revenues through June exceed the expenditures by almost $1 million. And they're mostly attributable to the growth in Area 3, 5, 7, and 14. And keeping in mind 7 and 14 used to all be 7 last year. We've split them out so you can see the internet sales that we've reflected. Year-to-date revenues through the month of June are better than the 18 budget expectations, which they're at 53.9% collected. We're only 50% through the year, so that's good. And it's better than where we were June of last year by almost $3 million. So our revenues are stronger. Year-to-date expenditures are still lower than budgeted at 49.5% and 50% through the year. At this time last year, we were at 52.3% spent. On the very next page, where we start with our numbers, we have all the funds with the beginning balance, the puts and the takes, the year-to-date revenues and expenditures, puts and takes. And then over at the far right, you can see where our estimated year-to-date ending balance is. Then in every case, it's positive at this point. So we still have positive balances. Nothing is going negative or getting close to zero, at least that we're concerned about. On page 2, this chart clearly tells you that our expenditures are ahead of our revenues. The blue bar is larger than the red one, and it compares it to the 5-year averages. So we're doing much better than the 5-year average of revenue and just a little bit more than the 5-year average of expenditures at this point. On the next page, I'd like to point out up in the revenue section, which is at the top of the page, we have split out the sales and use taxes for everything except marijuana and then the marijuana right below it. So you can see how that is falling out. Year to date, we've received almost $28,000 for tax revenue on marijuana. That's both medical and recreational together. In the general expenditure section below, it's done by department. So I'd like to point out that our two departments that were a little bit over last month are still a little bit over. City manager, due to the forward payment of the fire department fees for the where we have to be a month in advance on that one. And then human resources still a little bit over. They were front loaded on some things, so we're still expecting that to level out and be on budget, keeping my fingers crossed and a very close eye on them. You'll also notice at this point that our police department is pretty much right on budget at 50.2%. Again, they've got some forward-loaded items that they've paid, so I'm expecting them to be just about right on budget at the end of the year. Everybody else is under the 50%.
Except for debt service.
True, and that has to do with the timing of the payments that we have to make.
Okay.
But we're on target for those. Okay. The next page, page 4, is a replacement of the page that used to be in here. And I need to apologize. The last meeting where the city manager was going through the long-term asset reserve and we were trying to find the right number for you, we were misreading the report. You were very right that it was confusing. And so we've tried to straighten that out and clarify it with this page. So let me walk through it piece at a time, and you let me know if there's anything you need changed on here or if it does clarify it for you. So at the very top, we list the total fund balance, the percentage. The next sentence says that the year-end fund balance reserve is expected to be here. The city fund balance policy calls for targeted reserve, so it talks about that and the projected revenues, or how much money that is. It's almost 9 million. Then we have the key. So the key is the green, the yellow, and the red that relates to the bars right below. Tries to give you a little bit of information on that. Year-end estimated unassigned fund balance is 7.3 million. So that is the numbers that should match up with the green bar at the very end. I won't go through the numbers too closely on this because right below the chart, we have the actual numbers that line up with the segments. So the segments, the green is the unassigned fund balance, the yellow is the long-term asset reserve, and the red is the Tabor restricted reserve. And you can see how that changed from 2014 through the year-end estimate and then the 2018 year-to-date balance. And we try to keep the estimate close to the other years because that's more telling of where we think we'll be at the end of the year, rather than the very last bar, which is year-to-date, here's where we are today.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
On the unassigned fund balance, the 7.35 million is a little bit under the 16.7. Will that come into line?
A little bit under the 16.7 where you see
the 16 points. The city's fund balance policy calls for targeted.
16.7%. I'm sorry.
So it's 7.8 million or 7.9 almost.
In total?
Yes.
Yes.
So, I mean...
Will that come back into... It'll depend on whether we put more money into the reserve or not, depending on how well we end this year.
Okay. And once, I mean, if we end the year well and we come up to the 16.7...
Just for the unassigned fund balance?
Yeah, just for the unassigned fund
and
balance.
We actually get to count that. We get to count the long-term asset reserve, and we get to count the Tabor as part of our reserve total.
Okay, so we're okay anyway.
Yeah, we're okay.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So below the chart, you'll see the actual numbers that go with each year, what portion is Tabor, long-term asset reserve, and unassigned fund balance, and what the total is.
Why does Tabor fluctuate from year to year?
It is 3% of your revenues. So if your revenues fluctuate, then you need to hold a little bit more in Tabor.
Okay.
So since our revenues have been growing, our Tabor is probably inching up a little bit as well.
The more we bring in, the more we get taxed.
The more we have to reserve. The more we have to reserve. So, yeah. And Tabor, it really is restricted. It's pretty much a safeguard to pay your bills if you go out of business. Because if you do dip into it for any reason, you have to put it back in by the end of the year. So it has to stay at the reserve that they've quoted at the state, the 3%. You can see right below the numbers that add up to the total reserve, below that chart, we have added the unassigned and the long-term asset reserve for you. That's our reserve that's available to us if we needed it, really. It's without the TABOR. Right below that, we show you what the reserve policy is. If it was 16.7%, this would be the amount, and the reserve that we have available that's above that policy, and what percent of revenues that the reserve above policy is. Does this make it more clear? Does this make it easier for you?
Yes,
This is helpful, thanks.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Burnton?
I think the CAFR made it quite clear. I mean, I knew that number wasn't correct when we were doing this 14 million, so all of this is broken down in that information. But I do appreciate that when we're talking about a later fund, that we actually talk about that amount of money that we have control over. And I'm not clear how you're coming up with. I get where you're getting the 3.3 million, because that's, but what is going into the estimate for the 4.8 again?
For the 4.8, this is
that jump
is based on our budget and the revenues.
Just the revenues? Okay. And is that, I mean, how do we, because we're getting leases, how are we accounting for the money that they're leasing and then the money that's being expended to take care of those properties, or the regular kind of expenditures as a landlord? Is that already anticipated in there, or do we take in that money and then that any other expenses for those come out? What's going on with that?
I'd have to look at the actual reports, and I didn't bring those with me, but I can get through that information.
Because we're not getting every dime of the lease. I mean, there's expenses out there.
Right,
what
we
we're
cover
doing.
expenses
And I
first.
think that's the piece that we're missing a little, and I need to wrap my head around how we're accounting for that, or who's being held accountable for that.
I will look into the detail on the lease
And I
amount.
appreciate you separating it out. I mean, it was always separated out. It's separated out very well in the CAFR. I mean, that part's fine, but be a little bit more diligent about not transposing figures as we're talking. I guess that does make it a little
as we were
confusing.
trying to pick the right line to read. So hopefully this makes it easier.
If you could get that, how much, because we can all go back and look at the leases and see exactly what the leases are for, but I don't think we're garnering 100% of what they're paying for their lease. I mean, there's expenses.
We'd cover the
Yeah,
expenses.
all right, thank you.
Be reasonable. Now, this chart that you're looking at does replace the one that used to be in the report that had all the green and white and green and white and green and white. We created those, we copied those sections to keep it in the revenue and the expenditure, and we looked at that, I think it was on page 3 or 4. Page 3. The bottom portion of that large chart was all of the reserve, and that's what I've tried to copy here so that you don't have to try and read through those green and white lines. Okay. So the next chart on page 5, I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
There,
Yeah, I think
Councilmember
I think I have.
Becerra.
Well, I think I got my answer. So, so just a little bit of confusion on the 2018 year-end estimate. So I see we have a 2007 on the unassigned fund balance. So in 2017 we have 9.1 million, just a little bit over that. Then year-to-date activity for 2018 is 917,000, which gets us to the 2018 year-to-date balance of 10.082 million. So I guess my question is, we're dipping into the unassigned fund balance at some point this year in order to get down to 7.35 million?
We did allocate some of the fund balance to help us with the budget last year. There were some one-time things we wanted to do.
Okay.
So I think there's about $500,000 for that. At this point, this is just where the numbers are falling based on what we're seeing.
Right.
So we can dig into it and
But we're not expecting revenues to drop over the last 6 months.
No, I wouldn't expect so. This is I want to say an old estimate because we do this a while ago.
Okay.
We will update it with the forecast of our 19. We ask everybody to go back through and say, what are you really going to spend now that you're halfway through the year? What do you think? Okay. And we will update it with that. But we don't have that for this report.
Okay.
Well, point of information, we wouldn't do that with the reserve funds, would we?
Well,
I mean, we don't go and ask people how much they're really going to spend. Those things are really designated and, I mean.
They're designated in the budget, but let's say they're going to underrun in an area, we'd want to know that. And in that case, we would either have another ask for you to say, can we spend it here? Or we would put it back in the reserves. And that might push the reserves up a little bit. So
To his
depending on
question,
how that.
how much of the reserve would we ever have we might use part of the reserve for something else, but there wouldn't be a change in the reserve, which what he was bringing up.
Not in the reserve, but
Right,
in our
okay.
estimate. And then at the end of the year, if we underspend and our revenues are really good, we could put more money back in. And
Back
so
into
that
the
could
reserve, but not into
Correct.
that. Okay, but not taking it out. So that
No.
was a really good question. Thank you.
Okay. Page 5 shows that we're still on a trend, that we're still running strong in terms of our sales and use tax receipts. Positive over last month even. Page 6 shows you the areas and how we're exceeding, which areas we're exceeding revenues in. The big ones again are 3, 5, 7, and 14. Most of the other ones still have a little bit of a gain. There's, I think, one that does not. A brief description on page 7 for those different areas. And then on page 8, you've got your history by area. Some explanation on the changes by area on page 9, and those haven't changed much, at least not the comments. So. Questions?
I have I don't know if it's a question or a comment, maybe it's both. Our marijuana sales tax dollars are going into the general fund. They're not earmarked for anything. When I would love for us to talk about that at some point, whether we would want to earmark it for something that, I mean, citizens made this choice. I've heard from people asking, well, what are you using that money for? What are you using that money for? Well, it's just going to the general fund. But could there be some uses for it that we could, I don't know what it would be, but what would be some priorities that would make sense out of that kind of money? Whether it's social, whether it's policing, whether it's education, I don't know. There are state dollars too, of course, that we have. We're supposed to be getting access to however they use those, but I think people are always wondering, where is this money actually impacting cities? But maybe for a future conversation when we're talking about the budget, I don't need us to decide anything tonight, but I have been asked, where is it going? It's going into the general fund. And if we've decided, okay, we're fine with that, I guess that's fine, but I'd like to, I know we've never really talked about it. It's like, how could we best use that and earmark it in a way that citizens would feel good about it? So, Mike, any other comments or questions?
Along that lines, I do have a question for you where you separated out marijuana sales tax. So we didn't budget for that, or the budget for that is included in the line above?
It's included. We didn't separate that. I don't think we did have an estimate of what we thought it would be, but I don't think we forecasted it as a separate line item.
First year.
If I remember correctly. Because we weren't quite sure exactly how much it would be.
And I'll say the other thing with that is that we we're well conservative with that estimate as well. And I think that it'll surpass that clearly, given what we're seeing today for the first 6 months of the year. I believe we only forecasted $350,000 for the year, if I remember correctly.
I was thinking right around 250.
Yeah, so it's significantly more than what we anticipated. But heretofore, we'll create trends that will be able to track that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the way you broke out the funds. That was helpful. You're welcome. Moving on to council members' choice. Mayor Pro Tem, you want to begin tonight? You look like no, maybe not.
Actually, let me think about it. I may not have anything, but I'm trying to think if there was something I was supposed to talk
Councilmember
about.
Quest?
I'm going to pass for this moment right now.
He needs a second.
It's too early.
It's too early. Councilmember Martinez, let's hurry it up.
Sure, yeah. I had a great meeting with Transportation last week, and a couple of questions came up from them. They asked where we were with, or they asked us to revisit or report back to them on what recommendations, speed calming recommendations they came with last time. So it wasn't in the actual memo that they presented, but it was in the chair's letter. So I don't know if Manager Keck, if you have any updates on that, or maybe we should schedule some time for council to revisit those and see what we would like to go forward with, if nothing has gone forward with that. And they also asked about the walk and wheel master plan, if council can revisit that. I think there were some quick wins outlined in that, so maybe an update on what we have done as far as that plan, or what we should be focusing on. So maybe a combined additional study session if necessary on that. That's it for me.
Thank you. Councilmember Burntine.
I have a report for the Inglewood Housing Authority, the Urban Renewal Authority. I have a report for the Inglewood Housing Authority and the Urban Renewal Authority that I meant to give last time, but we went so desperately long last time, but I will make those reports as we have agreed as a council on the dais there. So that's all that I have tonight. Did you? Smart. Don't say anything, just go
I
ahead.
think I'm confused. Did we decide that we were going to do those reports from the dais or in here?
I thought we said just council members' choice. We didn't. I don't think we designated in that meeting or a study session. But
I believe that the public and on the record that it needs to be there, and this is a study session that's just informational, and I believe that that's important for the public to hear. So I just wanted to let you know that I was prepared to go ahead and give that report, but I believe that it was probably inappropriate given the hour. So I just was informational only, as I think this meeting is for. So, and whether we agreed to do it or not, which you seem to be sticking on, I don't know. She's making my time go long. That's not right.
You were asked.
I just wanted to say I will be more than happy to give those reports. I will do them on the dais at the next meeting.
Is that all?
Yeah, yes.
Great. Councilmember Sierra?
Nothing for me tonight. Right, yeah, there's nothing for me.
Trying to
Back-
way to say nothing. Competition going.
Back to Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
Actually, I don't have anything for
All right.
tonight.
Member Cuesta?
Thank you. And it was one I touched on at the end of the last meeting as well, but I know it was very late for everybody. Where does the ADU conversation currently stand?
Yeah, hang on one second. We do have that scheduled, I think, for a study session on August 27th, and it's a recap of all the actions that council has taken thus far. I believe that staff is going to come back with a proposed recommendation along with some additional data from, because so much time has elapsed from the last time we've met on this item. Several other communities in the area have actually taken action or are taking action on accessory dwelling units, and they're going to share a matrix of what decisions those communities are making. And so it will be August 27th study session that you will have that topic. And I believe, because a lot of residents are asking for some sort of action, hopefully watching from that, it'll be maybe council giving some direction as to which way to move as well, definitively.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
I have a few things. Manager Kick, did you have that letter from Mayor Pico by chance?
I do, yeah, and I'm happy to read that if you'd like.
Okay, so Mayor Pico from Centennial has sent out a letter to most of the mayor's caucuses, to the mayor's caucus about the Streamline Act. Is it S3157?
Yeah, Senate Bill 3157.
And it's really about broadband and municipal freedom, really, to do what they want to do. So maybe you can tell them what it is. You've got the letter, and whether or not we would want to join. We're being asked as to whether we want to join. We're not quite in the same place as some of these other cities.
I won't read it. It's fairly long. I'll just kind of summarize. So Senate Bill 3157 that's before the United States Senate right now is a bill that it means streamlining the rapid evolution and modernization of leading-edge infrastructure necessary to enhance small cell deployment. So as you may be aware, most of the major companies, actually all of them, are moving to small cell technology. So instead of having giant cell phone towers, now what they're doing is building smaller ones and having more of them, so they're more ubiquitous or more evident in the community to actually provide not only cell service but Wi-Fi service at multiple locations. And so this particular act that's being put forward by the Senate basically starts to get into preempting what's going on at the local level. So many states, including Colorado, have developed legislation that allows for local governments to determine how small cell technology will be rolled out. And this streamlined bill, the 3157 that's been put forward, really complicates, again, that deployment process that local governments might use. And so Mayor Pico, who is a part of the National League of Cities Technology Committee, has worked with her colleagues from across the country to enunciate that this particular bill would be detrimental or injurious to local government's ability to decide how small cell technology would be rolled out. And so I'm happy to send this letter to all the council members as well, so you can see what Centennial's objections are, and specifically Mayor Pico's, but to also see if, in fact, the council would like to see a similar letter emanate from Inglewood that talks about this. And again, there are some inappropriate timelines. In other words, it really, clearly the industry has gotten with some of the members of the Senate to really put the screws to the cities to figure this out more quickly than probably what is necessary. And as you're even maybe aware, if you've been listening to us, we've been, over the last year and a half, we've actually been working with, I think our city attorney's been working with Verizon to look at how to roll out small cell technology. And we've been working towards a model ordinance, and that would be preempted now by this bill, which would force us to go ahead and adopt something haphazardly. And, again, I don't think every neighborhood wants to see a small cell in their neighborhood because they are visible. They're probably as large as a trash barrel up on a pole or, on the street level, and we want to be able to prepare for what we want that to look like, where those would be, and how the city would be compensated for the use of the right-of-way. So these are all things that would be preempted by this bill, and that's why we're asking Senator Gardner as well as Senator Bennett to not approve that bill.
So that's a great intro to it. Maybe send it out to all of us.
Sure.
I just got it today. I'd heard about it last week, and perhaps at the end of our next regular meeting during Council's Choice, I'll bring it back up to see whether you would like to see us join in with a letter to support us and leave it to the local control of the communities or not. So that's some background on it. A few other things. Been a lot of things going on in the last week with extra meetings. Arapahoe commissioners, mayors, and managers. We met on Friday. Inglewood hosted at the River Run. And our major focus during that time was how different communities, that both the county and mayors are focused on homelessness in their communities. And Commissioner Nancy Jackson has assembled a group of people within the county from various jurisdictions, not ours, but to put together a summit on homelessness in the fall. So she and I have talked a bit. They want to involve some of the folks that are involved already in our city. So we'll keep working on that and figuring out when a date is. It's supposed to be sometime in September, maybe early October, that the county wants to host something. If you remember, on Wednesday we have the Tri-Cities meeting here at 7:30, and that the choice of the three cities is again to focus on homelessness and how we're each approaching it, how to be more regional in our understanding of what's happening. And then I already mentioned the marijuana tax. So last thing I did on Saturday is I did a dunk tank with this. with Tony Arnaldi's group that works with kids in the community, both here, Sheridan, and around, and to try and help families become more engaged in the community and to really enrich the lives of all of our kids in different ways. And it was a community garden and water day that I think we all saw the flyer for, and the chief didn't want to do it, and he said no, and I said yes, so I got dunked, I think, about 20 times on Saturday. So I said it was no different than a Monday night, right?
Thank you for doing that.
You're a good sport.
Yeah.
I have a little bruise on the back. But it was actually great fun. I think the kids were all between like 4 years old and maybe 10 or 12, and when they saw who they were dunking, I think they thought, oh, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. I said, no, do it. So it was fun. Anyway, that's all I have. So manager's choice?
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. I wanted to, I kept Margaret Brocklander here for an extended period of time. We know that many of you have become frustrated by not receiving certain emails, and so we're going to teach you how to fish tonight a little bit on how to use the Mimecast system. So I will hand out these sheets, and Margaret will describe to you how you can actually free emails that are trapped in your spam filter. That's exciting stuff.
Yes.
Free the mail.
Hopefully, we all still have our faculties at 8:40. Maybe we can understand this.
Could be midnight. Yes. So much for getting out early.
You can test my instructions.
Thank you.
That'd be great. So I put together just a quick personal portal guide on how to release emails. So the first part is logging into Mimecast, and the URL is, I didn't bring my glasses, webmail-us.mimecast.com. You're welcome to try if you would like to try and you have your laptops. It's totally up to you. It's a real simple, easy to follow, step-by-step. There's 7 steps. Each one is numbered. So you log into the Mimecast site. You enter in your network credentials. Same credentials that you use for email today. That has not changed. There's 3 parts that it's asking for. The first one is your email address. Second, your network password. And then click to log in. Once you're in the system, you'll see all of the emails that have been held in your account. It's your personal account. You can only see your own emails. If there's one in there that you want to release, you click on it, you click the release button, it sends it over to your inbox. It is now in your inbox. You now have control over the email. There's 3 options. You can release it one time. It'll go to your email box, your inbox, you read it, and you discard it or do what you need to do with it. There's also release and permit, so that next time if it's a known sender, you release it to your inbox, and that sender's emails will always go into your inbox. And then there's the domain. So your domain is at inglewoodco.gov, at gmail.com, at Yahoo. That's the domain. If it's a particular domain that you know is consistently getting stuck by spam, you can list the domain. We would prefer you didn't list at gmail.com because that's not a really good domain to list. But pick, if it's a known email, then pick release messages and permit sender. That sender's email will always hit your email box. If you have any problems at all, we're available for training, either group or one-on-one. We're also available at helpdesk@inglewoodco.gov. Send us the email that's being blocked and we'll unblock it for you. And Sam will help you reset that.
This is great.
This
Thank
is
you.
helpful. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for putting it on cardstock.
And
I'll
if
be
you-
using it a lot.
Yeah, I would have never known to even go here to do that. So thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I mean, because I was taught just to go into Microsoft and Mimecast is up.
Yes, and that is an option that you can use, but not everyone has that option. And there's been problems with it, so I didn't want to go down that road and introduce another problem. This is a sure bet.
Is it possible that I'm not getting everything in there?
No, they're the same.
Okay.
Yeah, so there is another option when you open up Outlook. You have Mimecast at the top. I've seen it be flaky for me, so I didn't want to teach something where it's flaky and then you're frustrated. This is a sure bet. This is the client. It's hosted. You can always go here. It's always going to work. So this was the option that I went with.
Councilmember Berentine?
Even the least savvy, admittedly the least savvy, was able to teach me how to do that. I was Councilman Mayor Pro Tem. So that was not my issue. My issue was what the policy is. What is the spam policy that is knocking a person out who's sending from the same address, and then the next time they're sending from the same address, and then it's knocking them out. So it wasn't consistent. And so I wanted to know why, if at some point you could kind of go over what the spam policy is and why it would do that, then that's kind of what my concerns were, because then it started to give the impression that it might be more content driven than it was where it was coming from. And that's what concerned me, because I went back and realized I got emails from those same exact addresses with no problems, and then all of a sudden they're in a spam folder and they're not. So I want to know what the policy is and what the consistency of it is. So sometime when you have a chance, but that's not it. And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for showing me how to do this, but I appreciate it.
Good. Happy to help.
Great.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Councilmember Berentine, you're done. Okay. Manager Keck, nothing?
Nothing else.
All right. City Attorney?
No report.
Hey, we are adjourned. And we have no meeting next Monday night, but we'll see you all Wednesday morning for Tri-Cities.
Tell me what